Chapter 379, Faded Astral Wind. Chapter 379, Faded Astral Wind. Go! Ningzi spewed out a mouthful of blood. He staggered a little bit and then suddenly turned into a beam of strange light, rushing toward the deep place inside the dark magnetic noxious mist. Seeing Ningzi fleeing, the two Sky Realm warriors finally showed fear on their faces. Hesitating a moment, their fingers, which had released golden silks, suddenly burst out. The two of them cut off their own fingers, terminating the connection with the golden silks. Without any more hesitation, they immediately turned around and ran away. Xiang's face was cold and ruthless. He coldly sneered and instantly chased after Ningzi. A third Sky of Nirvana Realm warrior of the Heavenly Palace was also trying to cut off the connection with the golden silks and flee with the other three fellows. When seeing Xiang fly over, his face changed instantly. He opened his hands, and a glowing golden light flashed up from his swollen golden palms, suddenly attacking Xiang. Ha ha ha, Xiang coldly laughed. The negative forces appeared altogether. His mind was slightly triggered, and his skin turned to purple-red while each one of his muscles felt like they were jumping up. Bang bang! An avalanche of explosive forces burst out from his muscles. He ignored these golden lights, rushing all the way to them. The golden lights that penetrated his body were destroyed and simply couldn't hurt him. After his petrifaction martial spirit had reached the peak and mutated, such a level of strength could hardly cause him any damage. Falling into the golden lights, except for a little pain he felt, there was nothing causing discomfort. Xiang's mind was slightly triggered, and the 5 negative feelings suddenly flew out from his sea of consciousness, turned into a real entity, piercing through the golden lights outward, attacking that third Sky of Nirvana Realm warrior. The 5 devils silently grinned, stretched out their ferocious claws, seizing the warrior's limbs and head, pulling forcefully. Blood splashed everywhere. The 5 devils split this warrior. His head, 2 arms, and 2 legs were all torn apart. He immediately died on the spot. Under Xiang's mind control, those 5 devils clutched the corpse, the man's arms and limbs, and then threw them into the gravitational field. Blocks of flesh and blood spattered in the gravitational field, which now looked like a huge meat grinder machine blending flesh and blood. The gravitational field also became blood red. That grey tornado turned blood red, which frightened people out of their wits. Xiang put forth all of his strength this time. When they were face to face, he instantly beheaded this third Sky of Nirvana Realm warrior without hiding his real strength. Having killed this warrior instantly, Xiang didn't stop but continued to chase after Ningzi. The gravitational field ground his flesh into small pieces. Under the control of his mind, it looked like a whirlwind was following behind him. Rya, Cae, Lao Li, and Lao Lun's eyes all popped out, and their jaws dropped. Xiang had suddenly broken through the adversity, which had already scared the 4 of them. At this time, they knew that Xiang had hidden his real strength the whole time, and had never revealed his full power. He kept silent all the time, but once he spoke up, everyone was stunned. Rya and Cae, the 2 Sky Realm warriors, had been a little bit helpless in the encirclement of the Heavenly Palace warriors. It didn't seem that they could have done anything when they faced the golden silks and the golden silkworms. However, Xiang was different. As soon as he took action, the golden silks and the warriors were defeated, as well as Ningza's golden silkworm, which had destroyed Ningza's mind and made him leave immediately without lingering. Powerful Xiang had totally shocked the other 4. Aya's face kept changing while she was watching Xiang's figure until he disappeared. Her eyes looked extremely complicated. Cae was completely agitated. She had been looking for opportunities to kill Xiang and remove the soul barrier in her host soul. After Xiang's breakthrough, her face displayed bitterness as she felt powerless and frustrated. This fellow is really from the Endless Sea. Lao Lun smiled and shook his head. Didn't you say that the Endless Sea's warriors are not as good as those of our divine land? How can he be that powerful? Even Ningzi had no way to deal with him. Rya and Cae also shook their heads at the same time with thoughtful faces. Should we chase after him or not? Lao Li hesitated a little bit and said, "We all know about Ningza's tricks. He was humiliated this time, and he will be certainly crazier to deal with next time. If he is not dead, chase." Rya took a deep breath, turned into a beam of light rushing out and following Xiang. Si was a little hesitant, but she finally followed Rya. The two brothers, Laroli and Larolun, also flew out without too much hesitation. Young master, that kid could defeat the golden silkworms. What is his origin? In the dark magnetic noxious mist, 3 silhouettes were aggressively flying all the way. Among them, the Sky Realm warrior who had broken fingers wore a panicked face. He looked at his 10 bleeding fingers and said miserably, "We have had a great loss this time. I was cultivating this secret technique for many years, and it is now ruined by a kid. I am not sure if we can make up for this loss when we go back later. This kid is not a person of White Emperor City." Ningzi gritted his teeth and said with a ruthless face, "If White Emperor City had a powerful young master like him, we would have received the news. He is only in the Nirvana realm but could control us entirely as if he has a special way to deal with golden silkworms and golden silks. This person is our nemesis. Absolutely, he cannot live. Young master, what should we do? Your golden silkworm has been taken. You will be severely punished when you go back. No worries. I will quickly contact another team. Wait until we gather our strength, we will make this kid suffer." Ningzi grunted, "The secret technique which the other team has cultivated is different from ours. It must be able to defeat that kid. Rya and Si, these 2 damn girls, I will make them lose their faces. They dare to harm me. Young master, that kid is chasing after us." A heavenly palace warrior who was lagging behind turned his head around and suddenly screamed out loud. "Catching up already?" Ningzi turned around, had a quick glance, and suddenly laughed. "It's good that he is here. I haven't dared to enter the fearful land ahead. That kid doesn't know life from death. We can entice him to go inside and take advantage of that fearful land to kill him." As soon as Ningzi finished his words, the eyes of the other 2 Sky Realm warriors brightened up, and they both spoke up at the same time, "Master is wise." Xiang had chased after the 3 people of Ningzi's group the entire way. The gravitational field was following behind him. The auras of those warriors who had died in the gravitational field massively overflowed and poured into his acupuncture points, freshening up his whole body. Dashing like a rocket in the air, Xiang turned his head and realized that Rya and Si were also following him. He let out a sigh of relief and was more determined to kill Ningzi. The 3 people of Ningzi's group all had Sky Realm cultivation base. Although the 3 of them were all injured, Xiang knew that his full strength alone couldn't handle all of them in a battle. Perhaps he would even be killed. However, together with Rya, Cae, and the 2 brothers, the situation would be different. As long as the 4 of them could handle the 2 Heavenly Palace Sky Realm warriors, he was confident that it would not be difficult for him to use his real power to get rid of injured Ningzi. That was why he continued chasing Ningzi's group. A mountain peak covered with fog suddenly appeared in front of them. Grey smoke hovered around without dispersing. The 3 people of Ningzi's group moved forward and disappeared behind the mountain. Xiang also rushed into that grey smoke below the mountain without thinking too much. However, as soon as his body entered that area, he immediately realized that it was not good. That grey smoke area looked like an invisible mud. As soon as his body entered the place, it immediately got trapped as if it was confined deep inside the mud and could hardly move. The more he struggled, the deeper he would sink. The other 3 people of Ningzi's group had disappeared without a trace. Xiang's face changed. He was afraid that he had fallen into Ningzi's trap, accidentally entering a fearful land of the dark magnetic noxious mist. He didn't even have any reaction yet, but the other 4 figures had already appeared behind him. In their screams, none of Rya, Cae, and the 2 brothers could escape. They were all surrounded by this fearful land, their bodies couldn't move as if countless invisible vines were wrapping them. Fearful land. Rya was shocked, couldn't help but shout. Not good. We have fallen in Ningzi's trap. It is dangerous this time. In the dark magnetic noxious mist, every time before Rya had moved forward, she had always taken out the compass not only to identify the directions but also to detect dangers around. Once she suspected that the area ahead was dangerous, she had asked Xiang to move first to pioneer the path. This time, since the pursuit of Ningzi was too hasty, and she thought that there was no danger as Ningzi was ahead. She hadn't taken out the compass before she entered the fearful land. The countenance of the three people of Cae, Laro Li, and Larolun also changed. At this moment, their bodies were all tied up, and they realized that something was wrong. They kept struggling and thus slowly sank into that thick grey smoke area. After the 5 people of Shiyang's group realized that the more they struggled, the fewer possibilities they had to get out of this fearful land. Their faces darkened as they couldn't figure out any way to leave this fearful land. Unfortunately, this fearful land was very mysterious. No matter how hard the 5 of them tried, they couldn't break this area to escape in a just short time. Instead, this fearful land slowly pulled them down. Feeling a little bit dizzy, Shiyang suddenly couldn't see anything around him, as if he was going into the transfer formation. His sea of consciousness was affected and became chaotic. This kind of feeling soon passed very quickly. When he could adapt to the situation, he then realized that he was going into a marvelous area full of grey clouds bobbing around his body. Grey clouds were thick and endless like a sea of clouds. In this sea of grey clouds, the foggy mountain was hardly seen, only gusts howled and growled fiercely. Those gusts were extremely violent and contained mighty powers. Those strong energy fluctuations were a little bit devilish, as they seemed to be able to lead the sea of consciousness, making it unbearably chaotic. Faded astral wind. A terrified scream came up from a place not far from there. Rya looked at that howling gust, and her face was full of fear. The faces of the 3 people of Cae, Laro Li, and Larolun also changed. It seemed that those growling flurry of the wind over there were even more frightened than Ningzi and other Heavenly Palace warriors. Faded astral wind? Shiyang frowned. Is this gust very dangerous? Extraordinarily terrible. The 4 people of Aya's group all replied at the same time with a grave look on their faces. Chapter 380, Turn the Tide. Chapter 380, Turn the Tide. This faded astral wind is the most mysterious in our divine land. It doesn't have any impact on warriors' bodies, but once it blows our soul consciousness away, our sea of consciousness would be obliterated. After the soul consciousness in the sea of consciousness has been blown away, the host soul will be directly exposed, torn apart and crushed by this faded astral wind entirely. Ce attentively looked at the faded astral wind in front of Shiyang and slowly flew over there. Her face kept changing in fear. Rya, Laro Li, and Larolun helplessly watched the faded astral wind coming closer, and they didn't seem to be able to have any reaction. Guys, do you have any soul defensive secret treasures? Ce looked at Rya and Shiyang, asked hurriedly. Only soul defensive power secret treasures can prevent the faded astral wind's impact. Otherwise, once our soul consciousness is blown away, our host soul will be torn down. If the host soul was gone meant the spirit was eradicated and it was impossible to use any means to survive in this world. Rya, Laro Li, and Larolun frowned. They all shook their heads after Tsai's inquiry was made. Ce looked at Shiyang. Her beautiful eyes expressed a trace of expectation. The 3 people of Ce were all stunned, looking at Shiyang as they expected that Shiyang could have some mysterious trick to stop this faded astral wind. Why are you guys looking at me? Shiyang was astonished and revealed a wry smile. Do you think that I can help you? I am from the Endless Sea. Endless Sea's warriors are not as good as those of Divine Land. Even you guys cannot do anything, so what can I do? You and other ordinary Endless Sea's warriors are not the same. Laro Li reluctantly smiled. Although you only have Nirvana realm cultivation, not only could you break the golden silks of the Empyrean, but you also took in the golden silkworm. Even if it was in our divine land, not many young warriors could reach this level of yours. Ce and Rya also shook their head at the same time, as they both seemed to agree with Laoli's point of view. Previously, in the most difficult time, Shiyang had defeated golden silks and the golden silkworm of the Heavenly Palace and saved the girls from Ningza's hands. Shiyang revealed some traces of mystery which made the 4 of them secretly frightened. Hence, they could not treat him like an ordinary warrior of the Endless Sea. The way that the 4 of them looked at him had changed subconsciously. They felt that he was not as simple as a common Endless Sea warrior. I don't have any soul defensive secret treasure either. Shiyang shook his head, looked at the faded astral wind which was slowly approaching and said reluctantly, "You better find another solution." "What else can we do?" Larolun sighed, watching the faded astral wind coming closer and closer, as he said disappointedly, "Would this fierce faded astral wind destroy our host souls even before we have reached the deep area inside the dark magnetic noxious mist? Sigh, this trip is miserable. If I knew about this sooner, I wouldn't have come to the dark magnetic noxious mist." "What is the point of these words now?" Laroli snorted and suddenly sat down. "I hope that we can resist for a while and think of a way to get out of here. Otherwise, this faded astral wind will tear our host souls apart." Roya and C wore reluctant faces. It was useless to be hasty at this moment. They helplessly watched the oncoming faded astral wind but could do nothing. The faded astral wind was gradually approaching. No matter whether people wanted to face it or not, they all had to bear it. The faded astral wind shrouded all of them from every direction. This fierce faded astral wind seemed to have consciousness. As soon as it realized that some living creatures had come in, it immediately stormed out from every corner, wanting to kill all those creatures, and not allowing this fearful land to have any living creatures. It was not that Xiang had thought about avoiding it, however, as he saw that the entire area was filled with this devilish powerful faded astral wind, which was continuously surging, they simply didn't have a chance to escape. After all, the faded astral wind came and covered all 5 of them at once. It turned out as C had said. When this devilish faded astral wind had just arrived, Xiang's body didn't have the slightest change. He felt that the wind was not violent, as if there was nothing special about this creature. However, after a moment, he realized that the volatility of his sea of consciousness suddenly became stronger. After his host soul that had condensed in the sea of consciousness fluctuated for a while, the soul consciousness wrapped around the sea of consciousness like gossamers slowly flying out of his sea of consciousness following that faded astral wind. The peripheral soul consciousness of the sea of consciousness had already lost more than 10 strands after such a short moment. As time was ticking by, his soul consciousness in the sea of consciousness was gradually affected by the faded astral wind and thus fluctuated even more violently, as if his soul consciousness gathered in the sea of consciousness wouldn't be able to resist for much longer. Soul consciousness was fundamental to form sea of consciousness. The composition of the sea of consciousness was made by the condensation of countless of strands of soul consciousness. The host soul existed in the sea of consciousness under the protection of the sea of consciousness. Once the soul consciousness dissipated entirely, the host soul would be exposed without any protection. This faded astral wind would disperse the soul consciousness first and then tear the opponent's host soul apart. Its purpose was to let the warrior's spirit perish. Once the soul consciousness in the sea of consciousness was all blown away, death would find the warriors. Strands of soul consciousness dissipated one by one, which made Xiang unable to concentrate and made his mind become dazed as if it was occupied. He was sort of half-conscious, and his mind was in a bad state. He couldn't even conduct the simplest things. He looked at the other people of Aya's and Sai's group and realized that these 4 were in the same state as him. Their eyes were soulless while their dissipated soul consciousness was a little bit chaotic and was gradually leaving the sea of consciousness. That was not a solution. Xiang gritted his teeth, made every effort to gather his attention and carefully considered. He needed to have a soul defensive secret treasure to get rid of the faded astral wind. However, he didn't have that kind of treasure. Other soul skills performance required soul consciousness to be the core source, but he couldn't display any soul skills while his sea of consciousness was vibrating violently like this. Without soul consciousness, the soul skills were useless. In accordance with the current situation, he would gradually lose his consciousness, which would make it impossible for him to think of something by himself. Must think of a solution as soon as possible. Firmly believing in his own belief, Xiang was even calmer when facing adversity. He temporarily forgot the fluctuations of his sea of consciousness, gathered all of his power and considered a way to reverse the situation. Sky-breaking shuttle. Xiang's original soulless eyes suddenly flashed up with a trace of consciousness. An idea emerged in his mind. He remembered the secret treasure from the chasm battlefield. When he had entered the chasm battlefield before, his purpose at that time was to catch the sky-breaking shuttle. In Legends, This skybreaking shuttle could break all kinds of formation techniques and barriers. He had spent a lot of effort to get this skybreaking shuttle. After having had the skybreaking shuttle, he had communicated with it and received a message from the skybreaking shuttle saying that as he hadn't reached the Nirvana realm, he could hardly use it. In the Hengluo Sea, he and his forces had expanded everywhere. By hunting and killing many warriors and demon dwellers, he had progressed in reaching the Nirvana realm. He had made every effort to enhance his own strength as well as have the insight of the powerful Kai Yang. Thus, although he knew that he could use the skybreaking shuttle already, he hadn't used it yet. He knew that with his Nirvana realm cultivation base, even if he went to the fourth demon area to find the secret place where Yang Tian Emperor was confined, it was still difficult for him to use it to save the Yang Tian Emperor from that place. Kai Yang and Bozun were too powerful. Even if the Holy Spirit God, the ice-cold flame and the earth flame fused together, he was not sure that he could rescue and run away from Bozun's white bones Dharma body, let alone that he had completely consumed the power formed by these three great living forms. Therefore, although he knew that he could use the skybreaking shuttle, he hadn't used it just yet. It was because he understood that with his cultivation base, recklessly entering the fourth demon area was a dead end. It was not the same now. A series of thoughts flashed up in his mind. He finally had a solution. He tried to take out the skybreaking shuttle, immersed his mind in it, and communicated with the consciousness of the skybreaking shuttle. It seems that you have entered the Nirvana realm. Excellent. Nirvana realm's power is enough for you to use me. Are you ready for it? A feeble message suddenly came out from the skybreaking shuttle. What do you want me to help you with? Get out of here. Xiang hurriedly sent out his message. Possible. The skybreaking shuttle transmitted a very brief message. If you pour enough power into me, you can urge me. If you want to leave this area, you better do it quickly. Pour the power in? Yes. How much do you need? You are now in the second sky of Nirvana realm, so pour 2/3 of your profound chi. I can immediately tear down all the barriers and obstacles here. The stronger the formation techniques, the more power I need. The defense here is not very strong, so you only need to pour 2/3 of your profound chi, and it will be enough. Xiang's face changed slightly. Feeling the soul consciousness passing gradually, he didn't have time to think too much. He immediately concentrated his strength and poured a massive amount of his profound chi into the skybreaking shuttle in his hand. When 2/3 of his profound chi was poured into the skybreaking shuttle in the flying shuttle shape, it suddenly became extremely powerful as if it could tear everything down. It strongly flew out from his palm. Silver fish scale-like waves were shot out from the skybreaking shuttle, piercing through the layer of grey clouds in the sky. This skybreaking shuttle was indeed all-conquering, as if it could cut off all kinds of blockades and barriers, tearing the formation technique, which was like Maya above their head, apart. A silver beam of light drilled down from above, which looked like a silver galaxy plunging toward Xiang's head. Rya, Si, Laro Li, and Larolun, who were in a daze, suddenly realized a silver channel had appeared in the sky and had pierced through the fearful land, which was like a swamp covering above their heads. They both showed a frightened look on their faces and couldn't help but scream out loud. This is. Did Xiang make it? He is not simple indeed. Rya, Si, and the two brothers couldn't help but shout in shock because of Xiang's performance. They didn't know what Xiang had done to tear the fearful land open. Chapter 381, Insight. Chapter 381, Insight. Let's go. Xiang suddenly stood up and stuck his head into the channel. As soon as his entire body was in the channel, the dispersing strands of soul consciousness unexpectedly flew over and fell into his sea of consciousness without any known reason. Those strands of soul consciousness, which had left his sea of consciousness, didn't seem to fly away too far, just circling the faded astral wind. When he got into the channel, those strands seemed to no longer be affected by the faded astral wind. The soul consciousness now returned and went into his sea of consciousness once again. Xiang was extremely overjoyed. The group of Rya and Si was stunned and surprisingly cheered up. They daringly flew up to the sky and entered the silver channel altogether. Following the silver channel, the four of them stayed behind Xiang as they went through this fearful land. On the mountain cliff above the fearful land, Ningzi and the other two Sky Realm warriors smiled coldly, looking at the area full of grey smoke below. Those people already went into the bottom of that fearful land. I don't think it will take them long to die in this fearful land. Ningzi sneered coldly with a dark look. If those people die, although the golden silkworm has disconnected with my mind, I still have a way to sense it. The golden silkworm compared with us are different, since the fearful land down there can't confine joy. As soon as that kid dies, I can immediately recall my golden silkworm. Young master is wise. The two Sky Realm warriors both flattered. Suddenly, a silver channel shot out from the grey smoke below them, aiming for this mountain cliff. Xiang's figure in the silver channel appeared and soared to the sky from the vague grey smoke below. How can it be? Ningzi couldn't help but scream out loud, shaking his head in disbelief with his horrified look on his face. That kid already got through the fearful land. How could it be? Young master, Rya, and C are also out. One of the two Sky Realm warriors suddenly shouted. The situation is not good. Ningzi's face became emotionally troubled. He looked at Xiang, who was slowly flying out while his countenance kept changing abnormally. He then gritted his teeth and said, "Let's go. We will find this kid to take revenge later." After talking, Ningzi hastily flew away, out of this mountain cliff, with his fastest speed without waiting for Xiang to get out completely. Not long after Ningzi had left, Xiang was the first one who landed on this mountain from the channel created by the skybreaking shuttle. Rya, Cae, and the two brothers Larolin and Larolun also quickly flew out, exposing their shocked faces after the accident. Strands of soul consciousness that had left now re-entered Xiang's sea of consciousness. Xiang's face was agitated as he suddenly realized that his state of mind seemed to have some miraculous transformations. Previously in that fearful land, his soul consciousness had flown out of his sea of consciousness one by one. His sea of consciousness had vibrated violently. As the soul consciousness had intensely been affected, his host soul had almost been exposed. Dead and reborn. He was indeed dead and reborn. When his soul consciousness returned to his sea of consciousness this time, he suddenly noticed that his soul consciousness was fluctuating strangely, seemed to have some mysterious mood. Through this experience of escaping the precarious near-death situation, which coincided with his nirvana realm, he was faintly enlightened regarding something in particular. He was now in the second realm of nirvana realm with mighty condensed profound chi. He only needed a little bit of insight to be able to enter the third sky of nirvana realm soon. Escaping from death this time was somehow like one kind of miraculous nirvana realm that coincided with his state of mind. Escaping from the mortal realm required great wisdom and great perseverance. Ordinary nirvana realm warriors often couldn't break this bottleneck. Thus, although the profound chi was mighty enough, it was not easy or very slow to break through, as they hardly entered a new realm. The situation that he had experienced was very rare. He seemed to have perceived something, which helped him realize the true nirvana. Rya, Cae, Laroli, and Larolun all revealed an expression of joy after getting out of the channel. They then looked at Xiang with admiration. Xiang frowned while standing on that mountain cliff. He stopped for a short moment before suddenly retrieving the skybreaking shuttle and nodding toward the four people of Aya's group. "I need to cultivate for a while. You guys find your own places." After talking, Xiang flew away to another place on the mountain, dug a cave and went inside. He communicated with the earth flame, telling it to take guard for him. He sat in the cave, didn't bother with Aya's group, and started to close his eyes to understand the previous state of consciousness. The implication of the nirvana referred to its rebirth from death and its regaining of a new life in burning fires. Through this experience, Xiang was really aware of the state of consciousness of the nirvana realm. After his soul consciousness had flown out, his host soul would have been torn apart by faded astral wind, making his spirit perish. In this kind of situation, he hadn't given up but instead, had gathered all of his faculties, searched for solutions, and had finally found a way to get out of the fearful land, escaping death. That was precisely in line with Nirvana Realm's state of consciousness. Many Nirvana Realm warriors often did not have great wisdom and great perseverance. They didn't possess gifted enlightening light and finally came to a dead end. He had been dead and reborn again, making him more aware of the impact of the state of consciousness to a realm. Sitting in the cave, he quietly realized the magical effect of the state of consciousness and merged his body into his mind to perceive the most dangerous moment of his previous encounter. Gradually, his sea of consciousness churned up with strong waves. His lost soul consciousness reappeared, slowly floating around in the sea of consciousness. He was in the perception of the state of consciousness. His soul consciousness seemed to be washed clean. Each strand of soul consciousness became pure and flawless without any excess emotional impurities. When in the state of consciousness, his self and his host soul were alike. He was sitting cross-legged, slowly closing his eyes, bringing each strand of soul consciousness into the host soul. The soul consciousness inside his host soul had washed and expelled all the impurities, making his mind clear, clean, and accessible. Countless strands of soul consciousness were purified and purged from all the subjective emotions and thus became transparent in the state of consciousness. It was as if his whole soul consciousness was washed by clear water. His state of mind brightened, and his soul consciousness became purified. Even his sea of consciousness also seemed to have become a mirror that reflected everything and reacted to all kinds of changes around. Rya, Cae, Laroli, and Larolun came to this mountain later. After taking a quick look at him, they started to scatter, and seemed to find their own hidden location to restore their profound chi. At the entrance of Shiyang's cave, a graceful figure suddenly appeared. It was Cae. Standing 10 meters away, Cae looked at Shiyang's cave while her beautiful eyes kept changing as if she was hesitant about something. Should I take a risk? Cae's face was confused. Bright beams of light puffed from her 10 fingers, containing a violent active energy. Shiyang had planted the barrier inside her host soul, so, as long as Shiyang was killed, that barrier would naturally disappear. Cae obviously didn't want to be controlled all the time nor become Shiyang's puppet. She wanted to control her own destiny. If Shiyang was killed, she could immediately regain her freedom. If it were in the past, while Shiyang was meditating to restore his strength, she would have never hesitated to take action and would have released a ruthless blow like a thunderbolt to kill Shiyang. However, Shiyang continually performed his powerful strength. Not only had he broken all of the golden silks, but he also gained the golden silkworm, and even saved them from that fearful land. The power Shiyang demonstrated was not something that an ordinary Nirvana realm warrior could do. Although Shiyang was in a state of retreat, she didn't dare to act recklessly. If she couldn't kill Shiyang in one strike and gave him an opportunity to breathe, he would trigger the barrier in her host soul, and thus, she believed that she would be killed instantly. Cae was hesitant, considering if she should take the risk or not, but she couldn't make a decision yet. However, at this time, a figure quietly appeared next to Cae. Rya. Cae covered her mouth, letting out a slight sigh. Her face changed while she quickly glanced at Shiyang. After realizing that Shiyang had no sign of changes, she was then relieved, quietly moved back closer to Rya and said with a low voice, "What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing." Rya spoke up with an emotionless face, threw a glance at Cae and said, "Why do you come here?" Cae gritted her teeth while her eyes flashed up with some dots of light. She didn't say a word. It seems our aims are consistent. Rya stared at Cae intensely and suddenly asked, "You also want him to die?" A beam of hatred flashed up in Cae's beautiful eyes. She slightly nodded. Rya didn't say anything further, looked at Shiyang from a distance, contemplated a little bit and then said, "He is not easy to deal with." "I know." Cae smiled miserably. "I was not sure about taking action by myself, but with you, we should be able to kill him at once. This guy is really terrible. He has even seen us." Aya's face changed. She grunted coldly. Cae immediately shut her mouth, hesitated for a moment and whispered, "Should we do it? While he's in his retreat situation, if we join forces, killing him should not be too difficult." But Rya extended her voice and tightly knitted her eyebrows. "Ningxi is still alive, and the Heavenly Palace's people will not easily let this thing go. Entering further into the dark magnetic noxious mist, we might see Ningxi again. With our current strengths, it will be the same, impossible to defeat them." "What do you mean?" asked Cae with astonishment. He has to die, but I don't think it should be now. Even if we do not take any actions, the people of Heavenly Palace will not spare him. Rya thought a little bit and continued, the 10,000-year golden silkworm is extremely precious. Shiyang has taken Ningxi's golden silkworm, so how can the Heavenly Palace spare him? I know that entering the dark magnetic noxious mist this time is not simply Ningxi's group alone. Wait until we go deeper inside of the dark magnetic noxious mist. If Ningxi joins forces with another team, their strength will definitely increase significantly. By that time, we will take advantage of this kid's power, and then we will find an opportunity to. I understand, Ci nodded, you are indeed very wicked and shameless. Chem. Rya coldly looked at Ci, and then quickly retreated without saying another word. Ci didn't linger too long either. She looked at Shiyang with a complicated face for a while and followed after Aya. Chapter 382, I will call the shots from now on. Chapter 382, I will call the shots from now on. Shiyang gradually woke up. The third sky of Nirvana realm. After having understood this state of consciousness and restored his profound chi, his strength finally enhanced one step further, entering the third sky of Nirvana realm. Each strand of soul consciousness in the insight was washed once again, and thus, his consciousness became transparent while his sea of consciousness was like a mirror that reflected all tiny living creatures. The dark magnetic noxious mist was a little mysterious. In this place, soul consciousness could hardly exert its effect, and thus, he couldn't know how many changes his breakthrough had brought him. However, in the third sky of Nirvana realm, he was clearly aware that he had a deeper understanding of various types of power in his body and that he also had great progress in mastering different forces in his body. When his state of mind was clear, he now could perform his strength at the ultimate level, reinforce his sea of consciousness, and also give himself a subtle method of controlling his powers. Everything became marvelous. Once the breakthrough happened, his understanding was different as well. At this time, he knew that every time he broke through a new realm, it was not just simply about the growth of his strength. Sometimes, the change of realm was even more important than the enhancement of the body strength. It meant that in a battle, he could use his body's ultimate power with minimal effort but could still display the most intimidation. His mind was triggered. He and the earth flame in the blood vein ring formed a connection. What happened earlier? How could you, the ice-cold flame, and the Holy Spirit God be together in one place? Why have you already awoken but the ice-cold flame and the Holy Spirit God hasn't? I don't know why it happened like this. It is because of the ring, it dominates everything. It forcibly brought us together and made us continually gather our forces for you to use. The ice-cold flame and the Holy Spirit God spent the most power, so they will probably recover much slower than I did. Although I have already woken up, I have consumed most of my power, and thus, I'm very weak now. How can you restore the power that you have consumed? It is simple for the ice-cold flame and me. Just throw me into the heart of a million-year-old volcano. The ice-cold flame's case should be almost the same as mine. You just need to find an Arctic land so that it can absorb the icy power, and thus, restore its strength. However, I don't know about the Holy Spirit God. Its living form and ours are very different. I don't know how it can restore its power. Do you know when they will wake up? I don't know. As they've consumed too much strength, they might need some more time. How about the golden silkworm that you have taken? How is it? There are many god souls attached on that fellow. To destroy it, I have to besiege it and then purge those god souls that have been imprinted on it by its owner. If I can refine the god souls and plant barriers in it, I can easily deal with it. Oh. Xiang's heart was slightly agitated, his mind was spinning fast. He suddenly said, if you can entirely dissolve its soul barriers, does that mean that I can control it too, make it follow my orders? It shouldn't be a problem. If it is so, we can try. You just need to dissolve all the god souls, no need to destroy it. Leave it to me. Okay. There were two girls here earlier. I have my own plan. Xiang pondered and then communicated with the earth flame a little bit before suddenly cutting their communication off and taking out the skybreaking shuttle. He then connected with its soul. I am commensurate to you. If you want to use me, you have to inject enough power. I need enough strength to tear down barriers. Every time you use me, I will take the strength that you inject, harvesting good parts to enhance my living form. The more powerful the forbids are, the more of your power that I need. Our relationship is that simple. The sky-breaking shuttle transmitted a message. Xiang frowned, thought for a moment and asked, if I need you to get rid of the forbids and barriers which are created by a secret weapon used by a third sky realm warrior, how much power do I need to use? Wait until you are in that realm, then we will talk about it again. You need to reach that realm to know how much power you will need. According to what you said, you need to at least reach the sky realm to implement it. Any forbids and barriers need energy support. The stronger and barriers are, the stronger their energy support is. Hence, I need appropriate strength to break them. If you cannot provide me with enough power, I have no way to do it. Xiang was stunned for a while and then slightly shook his head. He was afraid that just relying on this sky-breaking shuttle to save Yang Tian Emperor was not going to be easy. As Yang Tian Emperor had been confined for too long, he had probably lost his spirit after being tortured. He might be obliterated soon. He now had the third sky of Nirvana realm cultivation base, so he didn't know how long it would be until he was able to reach the sky realm. After having perceived this state of consciousness, he was no longer naive. Even if he had the assistance of the mystery martial spirit, it was not easy to have breakthrough quickly. Mystery martial spirit could only assure him not to worry about the profound chi, but to rely on his experience to be able to understand the state of consciousness. The realm breakthrough, understanding of the state of consciousness, and profound chi were all indispensable. Thus, mighty profound chi alone was not enough. Thinking about this, he just let out a helpless sigh as he had lost his impulse to save Yang Tian Emperor. After sitting in the cave for a while, he stood up, feeling the continuous growth of the ancient profound chi tree. Xiang revealed a satisfactory smile. His fortune was good this time. Not only had he entered the third sky of Nirvana realm, but that ancient profound chi tree at his lower belly also seemed to be growing up and thriving because he had absorbed the aura refined by the mystery martial spirit and had gained the strange power, pouring it into the profound chi halo. Every time he broke through a realm, the ancient profound chi tree seemed to grow. When the ancient profound chi tree grew up, he gathered heaven and earth aura to transform the profound chi into the ancient profound chi tree whose branches were extending fast, filling those branches with profound chi and thus making them sparkle. When the profound chi filled the ancient tree again, it meant that the aggregation of his profound chi in this realm had been fulfilled. After that, he just needed to wait until his state of mind was clear, so he could then break into a new realm again. He immersed his mind in it, watching the growth of the ancient profound chi tree, looking at some branches that had become crystal. Xiang felt that entering the dark magnetic noxious mist this time was the right decision. In this place, he could comprehend his realm much faster than when he was outside. The spiritual light which emerged between life and death was essential for a realm breakthrough. What he lacked most was this kind of comprehension. Xiang stayed in the cave to think for a while. He then finalized his plan in his mind. After that, he quickly went out of the cave and looked for the other 4 people. Just after a short moment, he saw Rya and the 2 brothers gathering in a place, seeming to discuss something. Seeing him coming, the 4 of them stopped talking abruptly and looked at him. Why did it take you so long? C frowned. You spent 5 days for meditating this time, much longer than we did. You can know the time in this dark magnetic noxious mist? Asked Xiang with astonishment. Aya's compass can measure the passage of time. C nodded and replied, we only needed 1 day to restore our profound chi. However, you spent around 5 days or so. We just stayed here to wait for you. The 2 brothers Laroli and Larolun nodded with a smile. Laroli spoke up heartily, we brothers are willing to wait. If it weren't because of you this time, we would have never gotten out of Ningza's trap. Ha ha ha, the feeling when you find an escape to life from death is not bad indeed. Xiang, brother, thank you. Xiang nodded, frowned, and looked at the 4 of them. The 4 of them were somehow puzzled as they didn't know why Xiang didn't utter a word. They looked at him with a strange look. I want to announce one thing. Xiang pondered for a moment and spoke up, from now on, I will be the one who calls the shots. You guys will have to listen to me. The faces of Rya, Cae, Laroli, and Larolun suddenly changed. Listen to you? Aya's face became cold. She snorted and said, I admit that you are really powerful. But just after your 2 performances, you want us to obey you? It doesn't seem like enough yet. You will listen to the strongest one. Xiang showed an emotionless face and slightly shouted. The gravitational field, which was hovering around not far from there, suddenly approached and stayed behind him, rotating non-stop. When he had fallen into that fearful land, the gravitational field had stayed in grey smoke and had kept flying around without entering the fearful land and had never disappeared. If it was the outside world, the gravitational field needed to consume a lot of power to exist. Without him continually pouring the power, not to mention for 5 days, it could only exist a maximum of 2 days because of the depletion of the heaven and earth energy. However, this dark magnetic noxious mist was extremely enigmatic. The gravitational field became marvelous in this place. That was why the gravitational field still had the energy to exist after 5 days had passed. Golden silk threads were in the gravitational field, and none could escape from its shackles. During these 5 days, Rya, Cae, and the 2 brothers were very curious about this gravitational field, observing it from a distance. However, they couldn't see what mysterious features this gravitational field had. This time, after Xiang had gotten out of the cave, he immediately summoned the gravitational field to his side, which meant that he apparently had the absolute control over this gravitational field. The 4 people remembered the scene where they had fought with Ninji's group 5 days ago. They thought about some heavenly palace warriors having been ground into pieces by this gravitational field and suddenly felt chilled to the bone. If any of you are not convinced, you can fight with me. I want to see who can beat me. Xiang sneered coldly and said strongly, Rya and Cae, I know you are in Sky Realm and also had the intention of killing me. I now give you a chance. You 2 join forces to fight with me. As long as you guys can defeat me, I will give up and continue to let Rya call the shots. You are too arrogant, Rya said with a cold voice, looking very angry. Arrogant? Xiang shook his head and said seriously, I don't think so. If you want to be the master, you and Cae can unite. I want to see if you are qualified enough to lead me. I give up. Cae's face changed all of a sudden. She then lowered her voice and said, I agree to let you call the shots. We also agree. Laroli and Larolun spoke up at the same time. Chapter 383, Conception. Chapter 383, Conception. Having heard his tyrannical declaration in taking the control, the 3 people of Cae, Laroli, and Larolun had agreed to make Xiang their master after a slight hesitation. Among these 3 people, Cae had known Xiang's ability from when they were at the bottom of the lake before. Although Xiang didn't have a profound cultivation base, his strength was incredibly horrible. Plus, with her host soul under Xiang's control, she didn't dare to go against him as she was afraid that Xiang would secretly use some means to torture her host soul. The 2 brothers, Laroli and Larolun, had a friendly relationship with Xiang. They had soon known that Cae and Rya didn't have good intentions and that the 2 girls were wicked and deceitful. Thus, they felt that it would probably be beneficial if Xiang was their master. Another point was that the 3 of them didn't want to waste their profound qi. Picking a fight with Xiang brought them no good except for losing their strengths and wasting the demon crystals that they had harvested. They were not like Rya, who had collected a great number of demon crystals during their past time. Thus, 1 or 2 times of loss were nothing to Rya, but the 3 of them couldn't afford it. Therefore, after having considered the gains and losses, the 3 of them agreed to let Xiang call the shots. Rya didn't want to listen to Xiang. After the other 3 had agreed, she still gritted her teeth, coldly looked at Xiang and said determinedly, I don't think you are qualified to lead us. Your origin is unknown, you are not a warrior of our divine land, and thus cannot have a clear understanding of our situation. If you do something wrong, we will have to bear the consequences when we return to the divine land. Bear the consequences? Xiang burst into laughter, his face then turned cold as he stonily said, I will let you bear the consequences now. His mind was slightly triggered. Xiang's two hands stretched out and pressed down toward Rya. The life and death seal changed. The life seal was in his right hand, and the death seal was in his left hand. The two huge, sparkling handprints suddenly gathered and formed a violent life and death seal attacking Rya. As soon as the life and death seal formed, in the ear-splitting growls and howls, an enormous handprint, which was as big as a small mountain bringing along a stunning fierce aura, quickly covered Rya. Aya's beautiful face changed dramatically. She subconsciously moved backward a few steps, quickly released a protective halo around her, and threw out a coin. Great pervaded money. When Rya shouted slightly, 4 ancient words on the coin flew out altogether. Each ancient word swelled open in the air, emitting dazzling golden lights like golden stars. The holes amid the coins abruptly shot out brilliant lights toward the life and death seal. This great pervaded money was Aya's sacred level secret treasure which had been personally refined for her by the master of Bidi City. This great pervaded money carried the meaning of wealth. Whether it was the human world or the world of warriors, wealth was the cornerstone of money flow. Money always plays a vital role in both worlds. Money is the foundation of society. Through the entire historical civilization, the word money could be described as invincible. Money could buy all and affect the entire civilization. The 4 radiant ancient words on great pervaded money, which contained the meaning of money, suddenly dispersed and dashed toward Xiang. Before the 4 ancient words came close to Xiang, the conception from above had already affected him. In just a blink, Xiang's mind and sea of consciousness seemed to be influenced by wealth. When this word money jumped into his sea of consciousness, wealth and Upanishads in his sea of consciousness surged up as if it wanted to make his host soul become a slave of money for his entire life. During the cultivation, Sky Realm warriors needed to comprehend all kinds of miraculous conceptions and then add the esoteric Upanishads in attacking and use secret treasures to enhance the power of secret treasures and martial arts, making them have a role in affecting people's sea of consciousness. These were the fundamental differences between Sky Realm warriors and ordinary Nirvana real warriors. A bunch of money light shot out from the hole amid Aya's coins, crashing toward the life and death seal. An esoteric conception of cycles of dying and giving birth to creatures suddenly spread out from that life and death seal. Life and death conception burst out toward the money light. At the same time, Xiang's sea of consciousness also slightly woke up, consigning his mind to the life and death seal, using the conception in the life and death seal to resist the money Upanishads. When life came to death, money or secret treasures all became drifting clouds and death was the end of it all. As the saying went, the dead was like a light going out. For we couldn't bring money into this world, nor carried with us at death. The Upanishads of this life and death struck Aya's comprehension of money's supremacy into pieces. A bundle of money light and the 4 conceptions couldn't resist the marvelous life and death conception on the life and death seal. All the money Upanishads were crushed and scattered. The life and death light directly suppressed the gold money light. The life and death seal's power didn't diminish. It covered Rya again, aiming for her defensive halo. After a burst of twists and turns, Aya's defensive halo broke out into countless dots of light. This blow also struck Rya dozens of meters away, and it was very hard for her to stop. A mouthful of blood trickled from the corner of her mouth while the light in her eyes slightly darkened. After entering the 3rd sky of Nirvana realm, Xiang vaguely had a grasp of the marvelous concept of martial arts and secret treasures. It seemed that any attack and secret treasure could be attached to the previous conception, which then helped enhance the power of the spoken martial arts and secret treasures. Although the life and death seal's Upanishads that he perceived were superficial and couldn't make the great, terrific break of life and death just yet, it still had the upper hand when fighting with that dumb Rya. Feeling the marvelousness that the conception brought him, Xiang chuckled and suddenly urged his star martial spirit. Clusters of bright stars like pearls darted out from his palms. 7 stars formed the asterism of the northern dipper, and contained the ancient immortal essence of the conception, heavily falling onto Rya. Before entering the dark magnetic noxious mist, he had been trying to comprehend the mystery of the stars, watching the existence of the stars in the world of extinction, and had made some gains. This time when he had entered the 3rd sky of Nirvana realm, he suddenly realized the marvelousness of the conception for all kinds of martial arts. Once resorting his mind which he had consigned to that 7 stars of the northern Dipper asterism, his sea of consciousness shook violently and turned to be like a mirror, mapping out the trajectory of the 7 stars of the northern Dipper, using the star's operation to apply itself to the star map. A kind of miraculous, immortal heaven and earth Upanishads suddenly spread out from the asterism. Rya, who was covered by the 7 stars of the northern Dipper, watched the asterism slowly pressing down and had an illusion of her own. She reluctantly faced the star map while her profound chi seemed to be affected by the conception. Star intent domain true essence. The faces of Cae, Laoli, and Larulun slightly changed. They all screamed out loud together, looking at Shiyang in panic. "Are you a member of the Divine Radiant Cult?" The exclamation of the 3 people Cae, Laoli, and Larulun distracted Shiyang's mind and made his momentum slow. The star intent domain true essence that attached to the star map was immediately affected. That mysterious conception suddenly disappeared from the star map, and because of the disappearance of that conception, the 7 stars of the northern Dipper's intimidation was greatly weakened all of a sudden. Aya's feeling of weakness and helplessness was immediately gone as she was no longer affected by the conception. She calmly moved away from the star map, reached out and pointed at the star map. The sacred level secret treasure great pervaded money was swung up and the money conception once again played an all-conquering role, crushing the star map which had lost its state of consciousness. As you haven't reached the sky realm, your understanding is still too shallow compared to the conception, and you couldn't grasp the terrific function of conception for martial arts and secret treasures. When your own body is affected, the conception immediately disappears from martial arts. A low realm is a low realm after all. You can't just rely on powerful strength to make it up. Aya's face slightly changed, coldly muttered without waiting for Shiyang to speak up. "Since you come from Divine Radiant Cult, you are considered a part of the Divine Land. Forget it. I won't fight with you for this leader position anymore. If you want to be our master, it's up to you. I hope you don't bring us a way that leads to no return." Although having said that, Rya was extremely frightened at heart. She had a little more understanding about this mysterious Shiyang. Generally speaking, it was difficult for a Nirvana realm warrior to comprehend the conception thoroughly. Moreover, imposing the conception on martial arts and secret treasures was something that not all Nirvana realm warriors could do. Although Shiyang's understanding of the conception was still superficial, and the conception was affected by words, he was only in the Nirvana realm. Thinking about this, Rya couldn't help but feel a little scared of Shiyang. She knew that if Shiyang entered the sky realm and really mastered the magic and power of conception, she would definitely have more of a chance of getting killed fighting with him. She didn't know what other secret techniques that Shiyang still had to increase his strength. She was afraid that if she knew them, she would be even more afraid of confronting him directly. The conception disappeared. The star map's power was greatly reduced and was cracked by Rya. Shiyang froze on the spot. His face expressed a trace of suspicion after hearing Rya admitting her fall. He looked at the 3 people of Tsai's group, frowned, and asked, "Divine Radiant Cult? What are you talking about? You performed the star intent domain true essence which is from the Divine Radiant Cult. Only through the martial spirit of the Divine Radiant Cult could you have a profound understanding of the conception of stars moving. Not only did you release the miniature stars but you also added the conception into them. So, if you are not from the Divine Radiant Cult, where are you from then?" Cae pouted and said. Laoli and Larulun also nodded together. "Divine Radiant Cult." Shiyang shook his head. "I have never heard of this sect. Is it in the Divine Land? What is so strange about this sect?" Divine Radiant Cult is the most ancient force of the Divine Land, one of 7 ancient factions that understand the use of light power. The sun, the moon, and the stars are all the sources of light. Divine Radiant Cult has many magical Upanishads which come from these 3 great sources of light. You previously cast the star intent domain true essence which is one of the Divine Radiant Cult's conceptions. On Divine Land, only people of the Divine Radiant Cult can understand this conception. Chapter 384, New Understanding. Chapter 384, New Understanding. After explaining in detail, C immediately looked at him with surprise. You really don't know the divine radiant cult? This martial spirit of mine comes from the Three Gods sect in the Endless Sea. That Three Gods sect has 3 gods of the sun, moon, and star. This star martial spirit of mine is just the star inheritance. I don't know divine radiant cult. This is the first time I have heard of it, said Xiang with doubt. That's right. Laoli also smiled. In divine radiant cult, there are also 3 gods of the sun, moon, and star. These 3 gods are the 3 great colossuses of divine radiant cult, and their commander is the hierarchy of divine radiant cult, divine radiant god. The 3 gods of the sun, moon, and star are those who are under only 1 but above tens of thousands of people. You have comprehended the star conception which comes from the star god, then you are naturally a disciple of divine radiant cult. Xiang's eyes and mouth were wide open. After having listened to the explanation of Ce and Laoli, he understood immediately. The people of Aya's group had said that the Endless Sea's predecessor warriors were all from the Divine Land. It seemed that the Three Gods sect ancestors should be warriors of divine radiant cult. Because of some special reasons, divine radiant cult's magical Upanishad had been transmitted to the Endless Sea from dark magnetic noxious mist and had gradually formed the Three Gods sect. It seemed that the Three Gods sect should be a branch of divine radiant cult, a part that belonged to divine radiant cult. The Divine Land was the center of the Grace Mainland, the source of all warriors and supernatural Upanishads. This was not wrong at all to say so. No wonder why Yi Zhongfeng had said that he was the expelled disciple of Spirit Treasure Sect and that Spirit Treasure Sect of the Endless Sea was actually a branch of Spirit Treasure Sect. He also mentioned that the Spirit Treasure Sect's ancestors also came from the Spirit Treasure Sect of the Divine Land. Xiang was suddenly enlightened and finally knew the connection between the Endless Sea and Divine Land. The way you see martial spirits is not different from ours in the Endless Sea. Xiang hesitated a little bit before speaking up. In the Endless Sea, martial spirits are extremely precious and innately owned by warriors. When a warrior is born, his martial art is determined. In the Endless Sea, martial spirits were precious to warriors. Many forces and families who select warriors would seek for warriors with these kinds of martial spirits. Martial spirit is the fundamental foundation of a warrior. What do you think about this? Rya, Cae, Laoli, and Laolun exchanged looks while displaying a trace of disdain on their faces, then shook their heads altogether. Xiang raised his eyebrows. From the 4 people's eyes, he felt that his own understanding of martial spirits might be a little bit shallow. Indeed, Laoli chuckled and quickly explained. Martial spirits are not as mysterious as you guys have imagined. In fact, the so-called martial spirit is only some kind of martial art Upanishads and is not that magical. We cultivate many martial arts, and it is a way of using the power of heaven and earth. Martial spirit is a kind of martial art Upanishads. Xiang shook his head with a puzzled face. In our Divine Land, there is an ancient school that specializes in studying martial spirits. Perhaps Endless Sea might have it as well. This ancient school is called Martial Spirit Palace. Their views on martial spirits are the general views of the Divine Land's warriors. Cae revealed an indifferent smile. The understanding of Endless Sea's warriors toward martial spirits is too shallow. You guys think that martial spirits are too mysterious or too important. So, why do some people have innate martial spirits but some don't? Xiang was stunned and then asked again. The fact that some people are born with innate martial spirits is because one of their ancestors had reached the true God realm. Ce didn't hide any of these common sense things of the Divine Land. She smiled and said, a true God realm warrior can pass his martial art Upanishads on to his descendants, helping them have their own fundamental seeds of martial art Upanishads and thus be able to continue their cultivations through the inheritance of martial arts Upanishads and become warriors without relying on any other forces. That's right, Laoli added, the nature of martial art Upanishads which were passed on was quite similar to the ones that we cultivated. The ones who get the inheritance need an arduous cultivation. Inheritance of martial art Upanishads is only an uprising seed. Whether that seed can grow or not, It's still dependent on hard cultivation and comprehension, and of course, it relies on the individual. The person with martial spirit inheritance might be better than someone with one kind of martial art Upanishads on his body. In our divine land, even though there is no such heritage, it is simple if we want it. Simple? Xiang couldn't help but let out a light sigh. In the Merchant Union and Endless Sea, warriors consider martial spirits very important, even take martial spirits as their fundamentals as an essential factor that determines their future. How come the martial art becomes so common in the divine land as if everyone can have one? There are many places that sell martial spirit seeds. Martial spirit seed is also known as original seal of a martial spirit or martial spirit fruit. They call it by many names. In fact, the essence is the same. As long as it is integrated into a body, it is equivalent to understanding a kind of martial art Upanishads so that the body also has a martial spirit. Frankly speaking, martial art Upanishad and martial arts are the same. Xiang was stunned. It turned out that many places in the divine land were selling precious original seal of a martial spirit, which was very valuable in the Endless Sea and the Merchant Union. Thinking about this, Xiang revealed a wry smile and shook his head. Martial spirits and martial arts have no differences. Yes. Rya was the one who spoke up. What is the difference? To understand the difference, it is necessary to talk about why true realm warriors can pass on martial arts. Rya was silent for a moment, seemed to organize her words to make her thoughts smooth. A moment later, she said, "It is said that in ancient times when the true realm warriors encountered a fatal incident, they didn't know if they could pass on their martial art Upanishads by words, so they chose a shortcut. This shortcut was the martial spirit inheritance. They took advantage of this martial spirit inheritance to hand down their own martial art Upanishads to the next generation. As long as the offspring was not extinct, the martial spirits may be inherited from generation to generation. This martial spirit inheritance is much more mysterious than words. It was directly stored in the descendants who were born. The birth of descendants is equivalent to cultivating them. However, this also has a great drawback. The drawback is that this martial spirit inheritance makes the future generation instantly know a kind of martial arts without going through any arduous cultivation. Take your star martial spirit as an example. As you already have had the star martial spirit since you were born, your heart had some mutation, and you know how to use the star power. However, you don't know how an ordinary person goes through the cultivation of changing the body to form the star martial spirit. In other words, you know from the beginning how to use the star power but do not know which way the heart is cultivating to be able to absorb and use the star power. Do you understand? Xiang was bewildered, frowned while thinking and then understood. This was not difficult to understand. For example, the third sky of Rampage martial art, when he wanted to perform Rampage martial art, he must make his meridians to be clear and open and go through a cultivation process to be able to perform the Rampage, using negative powers to enhance his strength. According to what Rya had said, if a person who was born without a hard cultivation could directly perform the Rampage martial art to enhance the power, it was the martial art. It meant that martial spirit was the ready-made martial art. As long as someone had it, the person could skip the arduous cultivation and use the martial art directly. I understood what you meant. Xiang thought for a moment and nodded his head. Martial spirit is available. Without going through cultivation, you still can use it. Is that what you meant? Yes, Rya nodded. However, the elementary martial technique was different. For example, to use the power of gold, wood, water, fire, and soil, you must practice this martial art. You can change your body tendons and bones through this martial art and then gradually master the use of gold, wood, water, fire, and earth elements. After successfully cultivating martial art, you can use the power of gold, wood, water, fire, and earth elements. With martial spirits, you can directly use the power without necessarily having a step-by-step cultivation. What else is different? You can directly use the inherited martial spirit, but you cannot teach others because you can only use but don't know the process and methods of the formation of martial arts. In ancient times, those true God Realm warriors who encountered fatal incidents were not sure if the next generations could preserve this method of cultivation or not. Thus, they condensed martial spirits and passed them on to the next generation so that the next generation could inherit and be ready to use those martial spirits right at the time descendants were born. Therefore, only their descendants can have this kind of martial arts. Even if there is a betrayer in their descendants, that person cannot tell others about the martial art Upanishads so that they will know his martial art Upanishads. Is that really a good idea? In fact, this is very selfish. If the offspring are all extinct, their martial art Upanishads will disappear. No outsiders can get it. But, people are selfish by nature, so it is normal. Rya nodded and said, only when their descendants can reach the true God realm like them, can they then restore the cultivating method and the fundamentals of martial spirits. Let's take you as an example. Only if you reach the true God realm can you know about how to cultivate martial spirits. Then, you could teach other people so that others can also pass through the martial art that you have transmitted. They will know how to absorb and use the star power, and then let you become the master of a sect. If you say so, it means you know that this martial spirit heritage has many advantages compared to the spreading text martial arts. Why don't you guys really treasure martial spirits? Because there is such a great drawback. What is it? Without knowing what method to form a martial spirit, one person can still enjoy the results without having to go through any hardships of cultivation, and thus they would lack experiences. Once entering the sky realm, a person will need to have the essential understanding of each kind of martial arts, conception, as well as Upanishads. However, since that person lacks necessary experiences regarding the comprehension of conception and Upanishads, he cannot compare to those who have undergone arduous cultivations. With the same kind of martial arts, if it is inherited martial spirit, the warriors who reach the sky realm and want to comprehend conception and Upanishads will consume more star power than those who have gone through hardships of cultivation. Many people who have martial spirit get stuck at this step, cannot achieve the true meaning of martial arts and conception, and thus will never master the essence of any kind of martial arts. On the contrary, the warriors who have overcome the hardships during the arduous cultivation will encounter fewer obstacles and will be much more comfortable than those who have been given martial spirits. Since it is a shortcut, there are always disadvantages. There aren't perfect things in this world. Hence, in our divine land, unless it is the kind of extremely mysterious martial spirit, ordinary people will not choose to use martial spirit seeds to implant in their bodies, which means they can avoid the cultivation and directly have the ready-made martial arts. Xiang finally understood. His face became complicated. Chapter 385, Arrival. Chapter 385, Arrival. After Rya, Cae, Lao Li, and Lao Lun realized that Xiang had the star martial spirit and noticed the relationship between Xiang and the divine radiant cult, it was unknown why they were cautious when looking at Xiang and no longer underestimated him. Even in the divine land, the reputation of the divine radiant cult was like thunder, as it was not inferior to the merchant union or empyrean. No matter how mighty a warrior was, if he did not have a good background, those guys who were born with noble status would look down on him. As Xiang had proved his relationship with the divine radiant cult, his status rose. Even now when Rya faced Xiang once again, she also had to treat him with caution. After having determined Xiang to be their leader, the four of them no longer disputed. Since then, although Xiang was still the one who pioneered the road as before, whenever encountering any abnormal situations, they would seek Xiang's advice and take actions according to his assignments. Dark magnetic noxious mist was foggy all year round. Neither the sun nor the moon nor stars could be seen. There was no separated day and night nor any way to measure time. Only Aya's compass in her hand could vaguely calculate the relative passage of time. Half a month had passed in a blink. During this period of half a month, Xiang had led in front to pioneer the road. Aya's compass identified if there were any dangers ahead. If there was any abnormal problem, Xiang would be the one who moved forward to explore. On the one hand, Xiang's ability was powerful. On the other hand, as he had the sky-breaking shuttle, regardless of encountering beasts or fearful lands, Xiang could always solve the problem, either by escaping from those beasts or using the sky-breaking shuttle to fly out of the fearful land. Although there were a lot of beasts in the dark magnetic noxious mist, the competence of Xiang's group was not weak. They would immediately retreat if facing powerful flocks of beasts, and would unite to kill those beasts if they were not strong. The fearful land was not easy to deal with. However, with the sky-breaking shuttle, the fearful land was no longer a threat to Xiang. During half a month, the 5 people of Xiang's group had still been moving forward deep into the dark magnetic noxious mist, meeting a lot of beasts and encountering many other teams of warriors. The 5 of them had joined forces, beheaded some beasts, exterminated 3 teams, and got a lot of demon crystals. Regarding the distribution of these demon crystals, Xiang was very fair. He was not dependent on demon crystals too much, so he only took a small part. The majority was divided between the 4 people of Roya, Ce, and the 2 brothers so that they could use those demon crystals to restore their strength. What Xiang did actually puzzled the 4 of them. They didn't know how he could be that generous, giving them most of the demon crystals in this dark magnetic noxious mist, which was the only thing that could restore profound chi. Obviously, not knowing the reason was not very important as the 4 of them still could benefit a lot from this. Gradually, although they formerly hadn't been willing to make Xiang their leader, their attitude now changed. They honestly supported Xiang, considered him their true leader, especially the 2 brothers Laroli and Larolun. When Roya had still been the leader, after the hunt for demon crystals, most demon crystals were distributed to Roya and Ce, and they could only harvest a small part, thus they didn't benefit a lot from it. However, since Xiang had become the leader, everything was different. Xiang was fair, giving up most of demon crystals, which helped significantly enhance the 2 brothers' harvest. Hence, they were even more pleased to see Xiang be their leader as they felt that following Xiang had many more benefits than following Roya and Ce. As a leader, Xiang had set clear guidelines from the beginning. Before getting out of the dark magnetic noxious mist, they must put down the selfishness, were not allowed to have fatal and wicked tricks toward the team members, and they must work together. If anyone made a bad decision for the team, the other people had the right to kill that person. After this guideline had been set, although Roya, Ce, and the 2 brothers still had suspicion toward each other, they no longer had intentions to kill their companions. Gradually, this small team somehow had a sincere cooperation. They didn't have as many cunning calculations as before. During half a month, when there was no danger, Xiang always calmed down to comprehend the star martial spirit in his body as well as conceptions of the life and death seal. From Roya, Ce, and the 2 brothers, Xiang now knew martial spirit's drawbacks. He then soon considered the comprehension of conception his long-term goal, hoping to have fewer troubles when entering the sky realm, thoroughly understanding the martial arts Upanishads. He carefully kept hidden away 37 golden silks which he had taken from Ning's people. These 37 golden silks became a secret weapon in his hand. Once the golden silks and gravitational field were cast out, the gravitational field's power would be enhanced significantly. Any warrior falling into the gravitational field would first be cut into pieces by the gold silks, and then ground into powder by the gravitational field. As for the golden silkworm, it was also refined by the earth flame in the blood vein ring. Because the earth flame had such a great loss last time, its power had seriously reduced. After half a month, it couldn't refine all forbids and barriers on the 10,000-year golden silkworm. This made Xiang somehow depressed. He thought that he would look for a place where the 10,000-year earth flame could recover. This day, the 5 people of Xiang's group continued moving forward in the dark magnetic noxious mist. Violent energy fluctuations suddenly came up from the dense, foggy area ahead. Xiang and Aya explored the way side by side. Her graceful body suddenly trembled, her soft hand holding the compass stiffened and her full red lips slightly shivered. She couldn't help but pleasantly scream, "I think we are going to arrive soon." Xiang, who was next to her, was also agitated after having heard what she had said. He cried out loud, "You have discovered it." He had heard Roya and Ce say that there were 2 magical sites in the dark magnetic noxious mist. One of them might have sacred level or even god level secret treasures. The other one might have pure god soul. The people of Aya's group had entered the dark magnetic noxious mist because of these 2 places. Since they were going to see the miasma places after a long time in this dark magnetic noxious mist, they couldn't restrain their joys while their eyes were lit up. Sacred-level secret treasures were extremely precious in the endless sea. Only the leaders of forces could possess sacred-level secret treasures. Ordinary people couldn't even see them. As for the god-level secret treasures, it was legendary. He had only heard but had never seen them. In the center of the Grace mainland on the Divine Land, there were only a few god-level secret treasures. Each of them had intimidating and earth-shaking power. Kin Mo was the sect-guarding treasure that was in the hand of masters at the peak of the pyramid. Because of the dark magnetic noxious mist special features, surrounding these two miasma places was a kind of protective group of clouds, inside of which, there was the soul-perishing thunderbolt that could destroy the God Realm warriors' host souls. Hence, even if 3 God Realm warriors went into the dark magnetic noxious mist, it would still be difficult for them to enter these two great miasma places, so every time warriors penetrated the dark magnetic noxious mist, they were all Sky Realm warriors or below. If there weren't the soul-perishing thunderbolt outside the two miasma places, top-class warriors of the 3 gods sect in the Divine Land would come here in person for those god-level secret treasures. Flickering blue lights splashed from the compass like fireflies flying around the compass, making the compass very brilliant. Not long after that, those blue lights splashing everywhere suddenly gathered outside the compass and faintly formed a phantom. That phantom was ambiguous and surrounded by thick grey clouds. Purple snakes meandered out of the grey clouds, blooming amazing electric lights. Soul-perishing thunderbolt! Rya screamed out again, forced a faint smile, and then said to Xiang, seeing the soul-perishing thunderbolt means that we have found miasma places. We have finally arrived. Since Xiang had met her until now, he had never seen her smile. But now, the corner of her mouth had already revealed a faint smile. Her cold momentum suddenly disappeared and instead, gave people a fresh and moving feeling. She was like a group of frozen flowers that exposed their true beauty after the ice had melted away. Looking at Aya's faint smile from the corner of her mouth, Xiang was stunned. He was startled a little bit before speaking up. In fact, you look better with your smile than your previous indifferent look. You should smile more often. Rya instantly stopped smiling. Her beautiful eyes showed a weird trace. She coldly looked at Xiang, grunted, and then lowered her voice. Who needs you to care? Xiang didn't get angry, shook his head, and coldly said, less pretending to be noble in front of me. It's not like I have never seen your body without clothes. Xiang. Aya's face changed. She screamed an ear-splitting sound, showing her icy look, and said, I will deal with you sooner or later. I am so afraid. Xiang sneered and apparently was not scared at all. At this moment, the 3 people of Sea and the other 2 brothers all were wearing joy on their faces after having heard Aya's screams. They moved forward, looking ahead with brightened eyes. Rya was about to open her mouth continuing to say something, but seeing the other 3 people coming, she then just grunted, and aggressively stared at Xiang, quickly turning the compass toward the 3 people of Sea. She restored her coldness and then said, we arrived. The moving grey, foggy area ahead should be one of the miasma places. I have seen the soul-perishing thunderbolt there. Sea and the 2 brothers were overjoyed and burst into laughter altogether. We are certainly not the first ones here. In that miasma place, there must be other teams who have come here sooner. Are you well prepared? Once entering that miasma place, we will have to face many powerful forces from every direction. No one can be sure if we can get out of there alive or not. Are you ready? Rya coldly asked. The smiles of Sea and the 2 brothers suddenly faded away, and their face darkened. They silently nodded. I think we should first recover, wait for our power to restore completely, and then we can go into that miasma place, Xiang suggested. The other 4 people nodded, found secluded corners for themselves, and then used demon crystals to restore their profound qi, enhancing their body to its peak state. Chapter 386. The Galaxy, the Ancient Corpses, and the Secret Treasures. Chapter 386. The Galaxy, the Ancient Corpses, and the Secret Treasures. After a period of retreat, the profound qi of the 5 people of Xiang's groups had reached their peaks. Each of them was refreshed and full of vitality. Let's go. We can enter that exotic land now. Xiang came out first, looking at the others and told them, "You should be very careful. Do not spread out. During this long journey, we have experienced a lot of hardships and have begun to have a wholehearted cooperation. I hope this time when we enter that exotic land, everyone can have a great harvest." The four of them nodded all together. "Brother, when we are in that exotic land, we will need to rely on you. Ningzi is definitely in there as well, so if we re-encounter him, we need your grey tornado." Laoli laughed and said. Along the way, at the crucial point of time, Xiang's gravitational field had played an important role with its huge power. In Laoli's eyes, the gravitational field Xiang cast out was simply a murderous whirlpool. No one could be strong enough to avoid death inside that whirlpool. Entering the exotic land meant that they would encounter outstanding warriors from everywhere in the divine land. That made Laoli a little bit worried, and thus, he wanted to rely on Xiang. "I will try my best. As long as you trust me and do not secretly mess with me, I will also protect you guys." Xiang looked at Rya and C and grinned, "If you have any wicked actions while I am in danger, don't blame me for not having mercy." Rya and C grunted but didn't say anything. "Let's go," Xiang said nothing further as he revealed a faint smile. He was the first one to jump into that foggy area with caution. However, as soon as he fell into the area where the grey smoke was concentrated, he realized that big, long, purple pythons were quickly dashing toward him as if they just saw their prey. Soul-perishing thunderbolt. Xiang couldn't help but strangely howl and shudder. He was aware of the earth-shaking, destructive aura and immediately retreated. The purple pythons then restored their normal status. After Xiang had left, they no longer aimed at him but retreated as if they were only coming out for him. "Why are they coming for me?" Xiang's face became cold. He emotionlessly looked at Rya and said, "You intentionally want to harm me? You have said that this soul-perishing thunderbolt only aims for the host souls of the three god sect's warriors. I am only in the Nirvana realm, so why is this soul-perishing thunderbolt still against me?" He couldn't help but doubt. If it weren't because he had urged both the starlight and the electric shift to get out like using teleport, that soul-perishing thunderbolt would probably have hit him and destroyed his host soul. If his host soul was destroyed, it meant that he would completely disappear from time. It's impossible. Tsai's beautiful face changed. Seeing Xiang getting angry, she hurriedly explained. "I have heard from my predecessors that soul-perishing thunderbolt around this exotic land only aims for the three god sect's warriors. My elders definitely didn't deceive me. How can you be impacted by that soul-perishing thunderbolt? This is absolutely impossible." Laoli also nodded and suspiciously said, "Xiang brother, we will never deceive you about this soul-perishing thunderbolt. Before I entered the dark magnetic noxious mist, my elders had also told me that although this soul-perishing thunderbolt's intimidation is very powerful, it only influences the three god sect's warriors. How can you also be affected? I didn't lie to you." Rya coldly hummed and said, "Before we got out of the exotic land, you play a very important role. We can't just ignore the whole situation to harm you." After talking, Rya carefully entered that grey, foggy area. Those big, long, purple pythons twisted and emitted horrible lights as if they could destroy all souls. However, when Rya fell into that area, the soul-perishing thunderbolt didn't attack her but instead, stayed in front of her meandering. Rya came out, looked at Xiang and said indifferently, "I went in, but why didn't I encounter the same event as you did?" Xiang's face became sullen and kept changing. When Rya had gone in and out, soul-perishing thunderbolt had no reaction, which meant that this soul-perishing thunderbolt apparently didn't aim for warriors who didn't belong to the three god sect. It proved that what these people of Aya's group had said was not a lie. So, why had he just entered that place, and the soul-perishing thunderbolt instantly reacted? Xiang frowned but couldn't think of any reason. "Brother, are you a Sky Realm warrior?" Laoli quietly mumbled, looking at Xiang with unbelievable, shining eyes. Aya's and Tsai's beautiful faces suddenly changed. Their eyes brightened, looked at him with a strange expression. "If I were a Sky Realm warrior, don't you think you could have had a chance to bully me along the way?" Xiang didn't know if he should smile or cry. If I had that high realm, I wouldn't have stayed here with you guys and would have tempted to break in that exotic land even though I don't know anything about it. Listening to Xiang's explanation, Rya and C carefully thought for a while and also knew that their suspicions were ridiculous. They secretly let out a sigh of relief. If you are not in the sky realm, your host soul is obviously like an ordinary person. Is it so? C hesitated a little bit while her beautiful eyes were full of strange lights. I am sure that your host soul and ours are not the same. Rya and the other 3 people looked at him. Xiang was stunned while his eyes flickered. He instantly remembered the 9 Serenities soul-devouring flame and his host soul had fused together. This 9 Serenities soul-devouring flame was the heaven flame which had a devilish power to burn up souls. Is it somehow related? As he didn't speak up, Aya's group was even more certain about this and looked at him with terrified eyes. After a long while, Xiang nodded, sprinkled with a smile and said, "Maybe you are right. My host soul was a bit unusual indeed. I should have wronged you. This is my own problem. Alright, you guys go ahead, I will find you guys later. Once you enter, that soul-perishing thunderbolt will not spare you. So, how will you come in? No worries, I have my own way." Xiang confidently looked at that smoky grey area. None of the barriers of the fearful land could trap me, so how can this soul-perishing thunderbolt? As long as I can cross the outskirts of the exotic land and go deeper to the center of that place, I will no longer be affected by that soul-perishing thunderbolt. The people of Aya's group immediately remembered how marvelous Xiang was. Every time in the fearful land, Xiang could easily escape without any difficulties. Right now, listening to what he said, Aya's group understood immediately. No one knows how the situation in the exotic land is. How can you be certain that you can find us in there? Rya thought for a while and asked suspiciously. Don't worry. I have my way. Xiang looked at Ce. He had left a barrier inside Ce's host soul. Within a certain range, he could detect Ce's location through that barrier. Therefore, he was confident that it would not be difficult to find the 4 of them. Ce knew what he meant. Her face looked a little odd. Ce then went into that grey, foggy area without looking at Xiang as if she was in a rage. The other 3 people were bewildered, looking at Ce with astonishment. They vaguely guessed that the reason Xiang was that confident might be related to Ce. The 3 of them didn't ask about it anyway. After Ce had left, they also entered that place and slowly disappeared into the foggy area. Xiang was not in a hurry. He waited for a long while after the 3 of them had disappeared before taking out the sky-breaking shuttle and then tried to communicate with it. Bring me through that barrier in front of us, avoid those destroying souls' thunderbolts, and go straight to the center. How much profound chi do I need to spend? 1/3. Okay. I will inject the profound chi into you, and then you will bring me in there. Possible. The sky-breaking shuttle broke through a gorgeous silver channel and brought Xiang into that place. When Xiang penetrated that area, the soul-perishing thunderbolt around that silver channel didn't have any reaction because the sky-breaking shuttle had formed a channel to cover him. It helplessly let him continue ahead. The shaking halo rippled out. Xiang's body was like lightning drilling into the area in just one blink. After reappearing, Xiang realized that he was in a magnificent old city center. There were 100-meter-high ancient buildings with ancient stones together with dozens of these buildings which looked like small mountains. The roads in the ancient city extended in all directions. They were all smooth and made of hard, green stones. There were 4 enormous mountains at the 4 sides of the ancient city. These 4 mountains formed into the 4 symbols, respectively showing the postures of a bowing black turtle, meandering azure dragon, dancing vermilion bird, and the patrolling white tiger. The 4 mountains were huge and vaguely surrounded the ancient city. 2 vast rivers flowed meanderingly, hanging in the sky above the ancient city. The 2 rivers intertwined, emitting beautiful dazzling lights. The 2 galaxies hanging in the sky were immense. Bursts of volatility came up from the 2 rivers. Floating corpses in the water of the Milky Way could be faintly seen. People could also see god lights zooming over in the galaxy as if there was some secret treasure that had a spirit and was operating in the galaxy. The ancient city, the 4 mountains, and the galaxies suspending in the sky all constituted this magnificent but strange place. After emerging, Xiang instantly looked at the 2 galaxies that were hanging above his head as well as the gorgeous weaving beam of lights. He could feel a violent shaking power transmitted from that weaving point. That energy was extremely intimidating and seemingly endless. The 4 long-ranged mountains surrounded the ancient city, forming the 4 postures of the bowing black turtle, meandering azure dragon, dancing vermilion bird, and the patrolling white tiger, which brought along the meaning of wealth and fortune. This meant this land was a blessed land, very rare on earth and sky, as it was blessed and protected by the 4 ancient sacred creatures. In this imposing ancient city, some figures could be seen from time to time in those buildings. They were all outstanding warriors who could enter the exotic land. Those warriors wore cold faces, sometimes raised their heads looking at the sky, and watched around all 4 mountains as they seemed to be aware of something. Xiang stood on an ancient road and quickly identified Tsai's location through the barrier he had planted inside her host soul. Taking a deep breath, Xiang temporarily ignored this exotic land and instantly urged the starlight, turning into a bunch of lights that dashed toward the 4 people of Tsai's group. Chapter 387, 7 Ancient Factions. Chapter 387, 7 Ancient Factions. Standing in a stone fortress, Rya, Cai, Laro Li, and Laro Lun frequently looked into the distance, waiting for something in silence. Can he find us and come here? It has been a long time. If he doesn't come and we encounter Ningzi, we will surely be very passive. Laro Lun took out a handkerchief to wipe his gloves as he sometimes raised his head, looking ahead, frowning, and muttering. Rya's jade-like hand played with her great pervaded money as the small coin rolled back and forth between her slender fingers. Some golden lights occasionally blossomed out of the hole in the coin. He should be able to find us. After hearing Laro Lun mumble, Rya threw a glance at Cai and then asked, "Is it so, Cai?" The 2 brothers looked at Cai with an astonished expression. Cai hummed while her beautiful eyes turned pale. She gritted her teeth but didn't say anything. "Is there something that happened between you and Xiang? If not, how come when he said he could find us, he gave you a look?" Rya didn't notice her face changing while the coin in her hand suddenly stopped rolling. "He did something to your body, didn't he?" Cai's face changed. The pupils of the 2 brothers shrank. Their eyes bloomed out a bunch of light with a look of shock. "Don't put your nose into my business." Cai pouted, her red lips shivered as she said coldly, "In short, he will be able to find us. You don't need to worry about it." "I know," nodded Rya. "You know what?" Right at that time, Xiang's chuckle suddenly came up from outside. At the corner of the road, Xiang appeared with stars circling his body and then flew up, coming to the side of the group. "Ha ha ha, you finally came in. I was worried that you wouldn't have been able to go through that grey, foggy area outside." Laro Li was very happy when he saw him coming. He burst into laughter and said, "Without you, I don't know why I feel insecure in my heart. It's good that you came. My mind is at ease seeing you here." Laro Lun also nodded with a smile. Only Cai frowned slightly. She couldn't help but feel irritated when she remembered the barrier that Xiang had left inside her head. "Why did you come here so late? With your ability, you should have found us very fast. Had you encountered something?" "No," Xiang shook his head. "After I had got in here, I observed around a little bit and realized that this ancient city is pretty bizarre. Its surroundings are 4 imposing mountains, and 2 intertwined galaxies are hanging in the sky. I don't know who could create such a strange and enormous place in this dark magnetic noxious mist. I have heard that it was a god-level blacksmith." Rya slightly slammed her eyebrows together. "Everything, including this dark magnetic noxious mist, is that god-level blacksmith's autograph." "I have also heard about this," Laro Li nodded. "The 2 great miasma places in the dark magnetic noxious mist only open once every 60 years. Normally, outside these 2 miasma places, there is not only the soul-perishing thunderbolt, but also other powerful barriers. The soul-perishing thunderbolt aims for the 3 god sect's warriors. However, The other barriers are against us, Nirvana Realm and Sky Realm warriors. We don't daringly break into the places when it's not the time for them to open yet. Almost no one can bear those barriers' bombardment, and they will end up with their souls perished. Shi Yang was stunned. That's right. There was this argument indeed. Cai Yi nodded and continued, we have calculated the time precisely when we must come here this time. Otherwise, we would not have dared to penetrate this place. What kind of situation are the 4 mountains and those 2 galaxies? Shi Yang was startled and suddenly asked, have your predecessors talked about the environment here and how dangerous it is? The corpses on the galaxy should be the warriors who entered here before. It has been said that sacred-level secret treasures of this miasma place come from the galaxy. Regarding the 4 mountains, it seems to protect the ancient city. I have heard some people say that once the galaxy mutates, the 4 mountains will also change accordingly, and many kinds of dangers will appear. Rya looked solemn while she talked to everyone. Always pay attention to the galaxy above your heads. Be careful with the 4 mountains around. This ancient city seems to be a god-level place where that blacksmith used to stay. That guy stayed inside here, establishing his own sect and recruiting a lot of disciples. It is unknown why everyone in here is dead, and that blacksmith also disappeared without leaving a trace, except for some secret treasures in the galaxy above. This place is quite mysterious. That galaxy certainly has a great danger, and the 4 symbols mountain range surrounding us will not be motionless like that forever. Everyone nodded at the same time and got gradually more attentive. Have you seen any other groups of warriors on your way here? Cai Yi looked at Shi Yang. Those warriors are hiding in the center of the castle. Only 1 or 2 people paid attention to the surroundings. On the way here, I met some who were all at least in the 3rd sky of Nirvana Realm. Shi Yang contemplated. It seems that it is not just us who have entered here. Those people surely had to overcome many obstacles and dangers to come here, so they must not be easy to deal with. It is certain, Rya confirmed. Every time the dark magnetic noxious mist opens, it attracts a lot of forces and sects of the Divine Land, the Pure Land, the Divine Radiant Cult, Martial Spirit Palace, Heavenly Palace, Spirit Treasure Sect, the Devil Valley, and the Fighting Union. These 7 great ancient factions, together with other emerging city powers, will send their warriors over with the same purpose, which is to collect the secret treasure and the pure god soul of the miasma places. On the way here, through Rya's group, Shi Yang knew that there were a variety of warrior schools, many powerful city powers, as well as a lot of secret places in the Divine Land. Among them, the 7 great ancient factions, the Pure Land, the Divine Radiant Cult, Martial Spirit Palace, Heavenly Palace, Spirit Treasure Sect, the Devil Valley, and the Fighting Union could be described as the most ancient and powerful forces of the Divine Land. Each of these 7 great ancient factions had tens of thousands of years of history. Talented people had firmly occupied this fertile Divine Land, which had the best resources for cultivation. Besides the 7 great ancient factions, Divine Land also had a lot of other large countries. Some of them were secluded families that had lasted for thousands of years, and some were secret, fearful lands, which were not to seen or found easily. The relationship of Divine Land's warriors was much more complicated than that of the Endless Sea. The territory of Divine Land was immense and almost boundless. According to Rya and Cai Yi, they were from White Emperor City, which was just a city controlled by the Fighting Union. White Emperor City was a big city of the Fighting Union, with a population of millions of people. It covered an area which was much bigger than the Kiara Sea of Endless Sea, and had more than hundreds of warriors with all kinds of levels. There were dozens of small countries, which were under White Emperor City's control. In each of those small countries were all kinds of precious cultivation resources. White Emperor City was only one city of the Fighting Union, and the Fighting Union was only one of the 7 great ancient factions. So, it seemed that this Divine Land was indeed extremely prosperous, and its warriors were naturally countless. Powerful masters like him, who were called geniuses, could be easily found. Although Rya's talent was exceptional in White Emperor City, she was not considered a real genius if she was in the Divine Land. Many young people who were younger than her already had profound cultivation bases. 7 great ancient factions had been dominating the place for tens of thousands of years, with countless cultivation resources, holding a complete collection of martial arts as well as secret cultivation methods, many secret treasures, numerous spiritual medicines, and the population of hundreds of millions of people. With such a huge population, even if the existence probability of brilliant warriors was tiny, at least they could still have roughly 10 marvelous warriors. In the territory of the Divine Land, the kinds of secretly dangerous, odd areas were countless, and they were not much different from this dark magnetic noxious mist. Almost every month or every day, those 7 ancient factions and other forces would command their warriors to travel to the dark magnetic noxious mist. On one hand, it was to sharpen the cultivation base of their warriors, and on the other, it was for them to collect all kinds of scarce materials, to find and kill some strange wicked beasts, or to kill enemies' masters. Divine Land's forces were everywhere, creating a huge network in this vast land. Their power spread out in every corner. A large number of warriors were in several strange miasma places, reporting daily changes of the Divine Land to their sects, so that their leaders could always be updated about the changes in this land. Although hundreds of thousands of warriors came into the dark magnetic noxious mist this time, it was nothing compared to those forces' total number of warriors. Those who could enter this miasma place were a little bit mightier than ordinary warriors, but it didn't mean that they belonged to the group of the most outstanding warriors of those factions. In the Divine Land, are warriors like Ningzi powerful? Shi Yang thought of the enormous population of Divine Land and had contemplated a little bit before asking. Ningzedi's grandfather is just an elder of the Heavenly Palace. The Nings are only a small force of the Heavenly Place. Ningzi himself is considered a good seedling, but not the strongest one in the new generation. If one counted the whole Heavenly Palace, Ningzi is not ranked on any list. Hence, don't think that having taken Ningzedi's golden silkworm is a big harvest. Rya explained with an indifferent face. Ningzi is only 32 years old and in the first sky of Sky Realm. It seems pretty good. However, not to mention the Divine Land, only the Heavenly Palace can have more than 100 guys who are around 30 years old and already more dangerous than Ningzi. It is indeed the truth. Cai slightly sighed and said, "We are all from White Emperor City. Even though White Emperor City is pretty good already, we are not the top among the peers of White Emperor City. Among the 7 big cities of the Fighting Union, White Emperor City is ranked last. Among the peers, those who are stronger than us are too many. In the Divine Land, the so-called exceptionality is simply too common." I understand. Shi Yang was secretly scared and displayed shining lights in his eyes. Through Rya's and Cai's explanation, he finally had an intuitive understanding of Divine Land's situation. At this moment, he knew why the Divine Land's warriors felt that Endless Sea was only a barbarian place. That land was indeed worthy of being the center of the Grace Mainland, the source of all forces. Shi Yang's heart longed for that place. Chapter 388, Beasts' Roars. Chapter 388, Beasts' Roars. In the ancient city of the exotic land. Shi Yang and the others stayed inside an ancient castle, and frequently looked up at the sky where the 2 galaxies intertwined, waiting for the changes of the galaxies above their heads. Rya, Sei, and the 2 brothers had never come here before. They only heard about this area from their elders' instructions. Those elders had been here before, so they could tell them briefly about the situation of this place. The changes were different at every 60 years, and they couldn't even say what they would probably encounter here. Therefore, Shi Yang's group could only wait and be cautious with any changes in the sky. They wanted to find out some clues from those changes. In this ancient city, small teams like Shi Yang's group were many, but for the time being, no fight had occurred yet. Teams that had entered this place were apparently not ordinary. They certainly went through a lot of danger along the way to get there. As they didn't see any changes of this place yet, they all meditated to reinforce their strengths and maintain their supreme state, waiting for the point in time when changes happened. Ningzi hadn't arrived yet. It might be because the blood vein ring had taken the golden silkworm, and thus the connection between Ningzi and that golden silkworm had been cut off. In the meantime, Shi Yang was ready and well prepared to see Ningzi again. Unfortunately, Ningzi didn't seem to sense their location as he still hadn't shown up. Xiang was staying in a 100-meter-high ancient castle, in which there were hundreds of rooms with different sizes. The smallest one was about 70 or 80 square meters. This castle was obviously the place where the blacksmith had been living before. Taking a tour around this castle, they realized that there were many furnaces that only blacksmiths could use, as well as a few of forging tools. There were a lot of forging tools, but none of the materials had been left. This exotic land would open once every 60 years. It had been thousands of years since the dark magnetic noxious mist had been discovered. During the past thousands of years, countless warriors had entered here. Even if these castles should have had many refining materials, they had certainly been scraped away. Therefore, the people of Xiang's group didn't waste their time to search for them but instead concentrated their main power on the galaxies above their heads, waiting quietly. This time, the two brothers Laroli observed the changes in the sky. Xiang, Rya, and Cai were using the demon crystals to meditate. In a stone chamber as big as a basketball court, Xiang released a little bright starlight. His shining eyes looked at a cluster of starlight spots while he used the star martial spirit to control the starlight spots, letting the order of the rotary stars of heaven and earth circulated into his consciousness. A bunch of starlight spots, which looked like a cluster of fireflies, were flying around the stone chamber, brilliantly lighting up the entire chamber. Each starlight spot followed a trajectory, which could be a curve, or a straight line or a magical arc. They were all different. Looking at those flickering spots of light, Xiang's sea of consciousness slightly stirred. He calmed his mind to understand the magical trajectory of those spots of light. He immersed his mind in it. Since having understood the importance of martial conception, as long as he had free time, he would use his star martial spirit to release some starlight spots and then use the star manipulation to control these starlight spots, trying to find out the rules to comprehend the mysterious martial conception of the star martial spirit. In the sky realm, understanding the realm was related to the improvement of this realm. Since he had poured the martial spirit source directly into his star martial spirit to reach the sky realm, comprehending the truth of this star martial spirit's Upanishads and knowing the mystery of stars were much harder. Understanding this point, he then set his mind on grasping this martial conception thoroughly and comprehending the martial techniques to be his core targets in the future. When each starlight spot flashed up, he threw himself into a trance. It seemed that there was a wonderful feeling when he was submerging into the vast star area. He seemed to have a connection with billions of stars in the sky. This kind of feeling was marvelous, making him feel outstanding and able to understand the immortal star Upanishads. Suddenly, an Earth Flames message was sent out from the blood vein ring. Xiang instantly woke up, staring at a beautiful figure that secretly entered the stone chamber, frowned, and asked, "What do you come here for? Are there any changes outside?" That person was Sei. Her delicate dress draped around her graceful body. Each 5-colored ribbon was fluttering on her skirt. She leisurely moved forward, her eyebrows were picturesque, her eyes brightened like precious gems. Under the light of those starlight spots, she became gorgeous. "There are not any changes outside yet. I came here with the hope that you can remove the soul barrier for me." Tsai's graceful body stopped. She slightly gritted her teeth and said, "You said that we are companions. Since we are companions, you should not treat me like this." Xiang pouted and then sneered coldly. "I am afraid that you don't consider me your companion. It has been a long time already. I know that I cannot kill you and thus won't have any wicked intentions toward you anymore." Xi felt shameful and said unpleasantly, "At the bottom of the lake, you were clearly contemptuous of me, so I wanted to kill you, not to mention that your hands and feet were not clean. If you remove the soul barrier for me, I promise not to pursue that previous event. No more harsh things between us. How about it? As I have said before, wait until we leave the dark magnetic noxious mist and I will remove the soul barrier out of your head." Xiang was unmoved, shook his head, and said indifferently, "In case you and Rya unite to kill me, it is easy for you guys to do so in this exotic land if I am not careful. Sorry, I don't believe you. Leaving the soul barrier in your head helps me control Rya in the crucial time. I don't dare to let my guard down against you two ruthless girls." Tsai's delicate face suddenly darkened. She said hatefully, "My host soul has a barrier, so it is certainly limited and can't exert its full power. Once this miasma has changed, all the teams will fight with all their strength to deprive secret treasures. By that time, if my strength cannot be cast out 100%, I will possibly die here." "You want me to die here, don't you?" Xiang was still indifferent. "Speak up. After all, what do you want to remove the soul barrier for?" Si was silent for a while, and then her neck suddenly flushed. She turned her back toward Xiang, slowly took off her dress, gradually exposing her soft, white back. She took off her clothes until her slender waist was exposed and then stopped. Her hands clutched her big, firm, snow-white breasts. She then turned back, bowed her head looking down at her toes, and spoke up with an indistinct tone. "I know your preferences. As long as you remove the soul barrier, I will let you caress them." Tsai's upper body was completely naked. Under the dazzling light of starlight spots, her white skin was glowing beautifully. Her breasts were too huge that her 2 hands couldn't cover all of them. She was exposing an amazing beauty that could make any man's vein bulge uncontrollably. "Although I do like women, I am not stupid enough to take my own safety as a joke." Xiang's eyes brightened, presumptuously looking at Tsai's naked body. He grinned, "You should leave. Before leaving the dark magnetic noxious mist, I will not remove the soul barrier for you. Even if you offer me your body, it will not change my decision." Si raised her head, aggressively staring at Xiang full of anger. She tightly gritted her teeth, displayed a hateful manner, and resented that she could not crush Xiang into 8 pieces. Xiang coldly sneered and then clucked his tongue. "Your body is really mesmerizing. Wait until we get out of the dark magnetic noxious mist. If you still want to offer yourself to me, I will definitely not refuse." I really like women who take the initiative. I will not refuse any girl who proactively comes to me. By that time, I am sure I will not let you down. I curse you not to have a decent death." Si bitterly cursed him and soon put on her clothes again. After that, she left the chamber with a complicated face. Xiang revealed a cold smile, shook his head and whispered, "Her appearance is not bad at all. Regretfully, that is a wicked woman. Depending on each point of time, she will show her poisoned fangs. The timing is not right, otherwise, you would hardly escape my hands." As he wasn't disturbed by Tsai's arrival, after she had left, Xiang continued his arduous cultivation in the stone chamber and circulated the mysterious star power at the same time. Today, Xiang woke up again from the martial conception. The galaxy has had some changes. Raising his head toward Aya's clear voice, Xiang slightly frowned, stopped perceiving martial conception, and stood up. Rya was different from Yi. If there was nothing happening, she certainly wouldn't come here. As she daringly entered the chamber this time, Xiang knew that something was happening out there. "It is not the galaxy." Aya's face was solemn. "It is the 4 Symbols mountain range outside. Since yesterday, the 4 Symbols seem to have changed." A small earthquake quietly rumbled from the surrounding mountains of the ancient city. In that earthquake, beasts' roars could be heard from those 4 mountains. "Beasts?" Xiang was stunned, looked outside and asked, "Did you see any beasts appear yet?" "Not yet. But there are many roars." Aya's face seemed odd. "I guess that there should be around 100 beasts with different levels. I just guessed it from the roars. The real number of beasts is probably more than that. If those beasts jump into the ancient city, it will not be easy for us to deal with." "Hundreds of beasts." Xiang's face slightly changed. The lowest level beasts that he had seen in this foggy place were at the 6th level. He had never seen any beasts lower than that. Even if it were the 6th level, hundreds of them were already terrifying. If there were many 7th level beasts among them, that force would be very tough to handle. At least 1/3 of them were at the 7th level, Rya added. Xiang felt cold at heart. His face was tense. It seems that the changes in the galaxy should come very soon. With many beasts showing up, this place certainly will not be peaceful much longer. After talking, he went out of the chamber, heading to the place where the 2 brothers Laroli were taking guard. Outside the ancient city, It seemed that the four symbols mountains were lurching continually while the dull roars came up from a distance. In those mountains' shakes, some horrible changes seemed to be quietly born. Chapter 389, I Know Them. Chapter 389, I Know Them. Shiyang was standing at a castle window with the two brothers looking out towards the surrounding Four Symbols mountain range. He could clearly see the four mountains exploding and seeming to have some terrible changes. Waves of beasts' roars came up from the four mountains. It seemed that countless dormant beasts in the Four Symbols mountain range were about to rush into the ancient city and crush all warriors into powder. As the beasts roared, lightning gradually flashed from the Azure Dragon Mount in the east and then slowly flew over. From the White Tiger Mount in the west, violent tornadoes raged and churned up, slaughtering and destroying anything in its path. The tornadoes pulled huge lava rocks up to the sky. Each block of lava rock contained horrendous power. From the Vermilion Bird Mount in the south, clusters of fires started to rage, dyeing the entire sky dark red as if the sky were also being burned by scorching fires. The Black Turtle Mount in the north was flooded with ice and extremely falling thick snowflakes. In just one breath, the Black Turtle Mount was covered with dense white snow. Changes continuously happened in the four mountains of the Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Turtle, probably affecting ancient formations. Lightning, tornadoes, flames, and snow continued spreading toward the ancient city, getting closer. The four mountains constantly changed, which made the hiding beasts suddenly become crazy. In those ear-piercing roars, hundreds of 6th or 7th level beasts scattered out from the mountains. Their eyes were filled with brutality while they rushed toward the ancient city in a craze. Giant three-headed alligators, silver demon wolves, and single-horned dragon pythons, those who were rarely seen, now showed up one by one. Groups of beasts stormed out like a surging tide, quickly invading the ancient city. Seeing the changes of the Four Symbols mountain range, many warriors inside the ancient city's stone fortresses were quite horrified and instantly went out of the castles wearing solemn faces as they watched the beasts attacking aggressively. They all stayed on alert. Be careful. It seems that the peculiar change of this miasma place is about to begin. Roya tightly knitted her eyebrows. The beasts will outnumber the warriors. If we are careless, those beasts will immediately besiege us and it will be difficult for us to escape. Si, Laro Li, and Larolun watched the influx of the beasts with serious faces while taking out secret treasures from their storage rings, preparing to deal with these beasts. Other groups of warriors were still hiding inside the castles, standing firmly at the entrance, watching the beasts from the ground and the sky rushing over. Everyone was wearing heavy faces. These beasts seemed to know the ancient city's situation. As soon as they rushed into the ancient city, they immediately spread out to all the places the warriors could have been hiding in the castle. The stone castles had many windows but simply couldn't stop the beasts that could fly. Those flying beasts used their brutal force to tear down the fence of windows and then drilled into the castle to search for warriors. Beasts had an extreme hostility toward the invasion of human warriors. Their mission seemed to be to kill all human warriors. 10 6th-level green-armored scale falcons and 3 7th-level single-horned pythons drilled through the windows toward the stone castle of Shiyang's group. The green-armored scale falcons had the ability to fly with a pointy beak, thick skin, and sharp claws like swords that emitted dense, icy lights. This green-armored scale falcon had many scales on its body. Those scales couldn't be damaged by the majority of hacking weapons, and thus, it was challenging to cope with. The 7th-level single-horned dragon python was even more terrible. The horn of a single-horned dragon python was all-conquering, which could be compared to divine weapons which had been forged and refined hundreds of times. The dragon python's saliva was highly toxic and could utilize the power of frost. Once the single-horned dragon python got close to a person, its saliva and the power of frost would be spurted out together. Even the defensive halos released by Sky Realm warriors couldn't stop that highly toxic saliva which could dissolve many kinds of defenses. The power of frost could greatly weaken the defensive halos. When the defensive halos disappeared after a blink, a single-horned dragon python would dash over, tearing apart and destroying the warriors. Unless warriors had gone through a special body-refining cultivation, single-horned dragon pythons would strike them and pierce through their bodies. 10 green-armored scale falcons and 3 single-horned dragon pythons spread out and quickly rushed toward Xiang's group. It only took them a short while to find the whereabouts of the 5 people of Xiang's group. They immediately aggregated and rushed toward them. 3 single-horned dragon pythons and 10 green-armored scale falcons. Roya couldn't help but scream out loud while her face changed dramatically. Not good. These beasts are coming all together. I am afraid that we are not able to beat them in batches. Everyone must cast out your full power shots to kill all of these beasts in the shortest possible time at all cost. The more beasts come, the less chance we have to get out alive. Lightning, flames, tornadoes, and ice are slowly moving towards the ancient city. If we can't handle all of these beasts in a short time, it will be more difficult for us when they come from the 4 mountains and envelope the ancient city. Tsai's face stiffened. 3 silhouettes suddenly flashed up in another stone castle which was a few hundred meters away on the left. After those 3 people had gone outside, they worriedly looked around and immediately dashed toward Xiang's group. The 3 of them were 2 males and 1 female. The 2 men were 70-year-old warriors and dressed in flower blouses. Their faces now looked odd as the beasts were chasing them. They looked miserable. The girl was in the front of the 2 men. She was long-limbed, wearing a light yellow skirt with white teeth and shining eyes. She was incredibly beautiful. These 3 people seemed to have realized that the beasts that had jumped into their stone castle were too strong and had known that if they stayed, they would have been killed. Hence, they ran out of the stone castle to find someone that they could join forces with to deal with these beasts. Behind the 3 of them, 10 beasts rushed out of the stone castle, showing fangs and claws, letting out crazy roars and staring at them. "Grandpa, hurry up!" the girl anxiously called out. Her body suddenly changed and separated into 5 phantoms, escaping in 4 directions. Her true body hovered and swayed in the air. A vigorous flow of aura burst out from her body and then suddenly rushed toward Xiang. When seeing those 3 people rushing over, the faces of Larolie and Roya instantly changed at the same time. They couldn't help but curse. The 3 of them, who couldn't cope with the beasts, brought the beasts into Xiang's castle and borrowed the strength of Xiang's group to deal with them. It was already difficult for the 5 people of Xiang's group to deal with the 10 green-armored scale falcons and 3 single-horned dragon pythons. If they added the beasts behind those 3 people, they would become more passive, and perhaps they would be killed. Larolie and Si exchanged glances. Cold lights flowed out from their eyes. They were ready to cast a fatal strike, rushing toward the girl to exterminate her. This girl only had the Earth Realm cultivation base. Although she was mysterious, as long as Larolie and Si released their full shots, that girl would certainly not be able to stop them and would be beheaded by Larolie and Si. Xiang turned his back to Larolie and Si, consistently releasing his power into the gravitational field. Hearing the girl's shout, he suddenly showed a very puzzled look. After completing the gravitational field, Xiang turned around and saw Si and Larolie ready to kill the girl. "Stop!" Xiang threw a quick glance at that girl, and his face immediately changed. He hastily shouted, which stopped Si and Larolie. Si and Larolie were stunned. The energy waves on their hands were getting more vibrant. They were still urging their power to be ready to cast out their strikes. As long as they pushed out those energy waves, that girl would hardly stand a chance. Xiang shouted out loud, making Si and Larolie freeze. They both displayed a puzzled look on their faces, not understanding why he stopped them at the crucial time. "Oh!" the girl exclaimed, her eyes flashed up with strange lights. She looked at Xiang, seemed to remember someone, and then pointed to Xiang and unsurely said, You are. Zwasha, it's been a long time since I've seen you." Xiang revealed a faint smile. "How did you get here? You are Xiang? Are you really Xiang?" Zwasha was overjoyed with an expression of disbelief. "Didn't you already return to the Endless Sea? Why did you come back here?" The 2 elderly men behind Zwasha were grandfather Zwa of the Zwa family and that misty mountain range Kaixiao. When seeing Zwasha surprisingly shout, the 2 men also looked at Xiang and showed a very surprised expression. Come here first, and then we can talk later. Xiang shouted, nodded toward Si and Lao Li, and said, I know them. Let them come in. Sai's and Lao Li's faces looked reluctant, but they still followed Xiang's command without any defiance. They frowned while stepping aside, giving way to Zwusha to enter the stone castle first. Xiang's mind was slightly triggered. The gravitational field, which had been amassed for a long time, suddenly flew towards Zwushu and Kaixiao. The 5 huge 3-headed alligators, which were closely chasing Zwushu and Kaixiao, were suddenly sucked into the golden silks inside that crazily spinning gravitational field. Those golden silks were extremely sharp. As soon as the 3-headed alligators were pulled into the gravitational field, they were soon cut up and crushed into powder. Demon crystals. Kaixiao and Zwushu were both surprised and cheerfully shouted together. They looked at the demon crystals, revealing a look of desire. These 3 people should have gone through unwanted situations in the dark magnetic noxious mist. When the 5 demon crystals appeared, Kaixiao and Zwushu obviously couldn't keep calm and even stopped, wanting to go into the dark magnetic noxious mist to take the demon crystals. Do not touch those demon crystals. Come here first. Xiang shouted out loud. Zwushu and Kaixiao were startled. They immediately reacted and rushed over. How did you get here? Xiang shouted. There's a nautical chart on the Little Shi's dragon turtle armor. We based our directions on the chart to get here all the way from the Merchant Union. On the way here, we've lost a lot of people. After entering this place, there's only 3 of us left. Kaixiao's face was sad. He shouted, and together with Kaixiao, he walked toward the platform where Xiang's group was standing. Xiang, how come you are here? Oh, your cultivation base is now in the 3rd sky of Nirvana realm. The same as mine. The head of the Zhuo family Zwushu suddenly screamed out while his eyes glimmered with a trace of incredibility. Kaixiao and Zwusha were also startled. Chapter 390, Fearless. Chapter 390, Fearless. Outside the stone castle, the beasts were aggressively showing their fangs and claws. They let out terrifying roars, gathered next to Xiang's group, and were ready to rush over at any moment. The 3 gravitational fields flew around in front of the stone castle. Golden silks emitted gold lights and spanned like sharp blades inside the gravitational fields. 10 green armored scale falcons and 3 single-horned dragon pythons seemed to know that the gravitational fields were not easy to deal with as they ruthlessly stared at Xiang's group but didn't dare to move toward the gravitational fields to attack. They could only stay outside the gravitational fields without scattering, seeming to wait for something. When Zwusha, Zwushu, and Kaixiao entered Xiang's stone castle, they also dragged along 9 beasts. These beasts were the giant 6th-level 3-headed crocodiles and giant 7th-level 8-horn giant spiders. There were 3 giant 8-horn giant spiders, each of which was as big as a millstone. Their legs were shining with brilliant icy lights. They were very flexible and active in the air, letting out strange ear-splitting sounds. One gravitational field strangled a 3-headed crocodile and hung it in the direction where Zwusha and the other 2 were coming from. The 3-headed crocodile died instantly. That prevented the remaining 3-headed crocodiles and the 8-horn giant spider from recklessly acting as they were afraid of following in the footsteps of that dead 3-headed crocodile. They could only keep a distance from the gravitational field and stare at the 3 people of Zwusha. As Xiang's group was approaching, only with a glance, Zwushu could immediately realize Xiang's cultivation base. His face was shocked while he subconsciously cried out in fear. Kaixiao and Zwusha were exceedingly astonished as well, looking at Xiang with eyes of disbelief. They didn't know what Xiang had done in just a few years to be able to reach the 3rd sky of Nirvana realm. Let's talk later. Now is not a good time to reminisce. Xiang's face was solemn as he concentrated on controlling the gravitational fields, constantly moving them to prevent those beasts from having a chance to get closer. The stone castle was 100 meters high, but Xiang's group was only about 30 meters from the ground. This distance was not out of the beasts' reach. Even if they couldn't fly, using a violent force was enough for them to be able to leap up. Without the gravitational fields, those beasts would certainly sprint up and penetrate the castle. A single horn dragon python and 3 green armored scale falcons that had come before were staring at them, waiting for an opportunity behind the stone fortress. When the 9 beasts which had been following Zwushu all came together, they quickly blocked all directions without leaving any gap for Xiang's people to escape. Rya and Ce coldly looked at Zwushu with annoyed faces. Kaixiao was at the second sky of Sky Realm. Meanwhile, Zwushu was just in the Earth Realm, and Zwushu was only at the third sky of Nirvana Realm. To Rya and Ce, that kind of ability was only cumbersome for them. If it were Rya calling the shots, even if she knew Xiang, she would not hesitate to kick them out and let them fend for themselves. However, Xiang had used his strength to prove his position in the team. Even though Rya and Ce were not happy, they didn't want to have any conflicts with Xiang and could only accept Xiang's arrangement. Zwushu, you should not move. Hide behind us. The rest of us should be ready to cope with the beast's sneaky attacks. Xiang coldly looked at Rya and Ce and said with a cold face, "These 3 are my friends. If you 2 dare to cause any mischief, don't blame me for not having mercy." Aya's and Cai's beautiful faces changed. They grunted but did not refuse. When hearing Xiang's words, the 3 people of Kaixiao's group shuddered at heart. They were secretly vigilant and prepared to guard against Rya and Ce. Kaixiao and Zwushu were old foxes. Through Xiang's words, they could see that Rya, Ce, and Xiang were not really intimate. Facing the rampant beasts in the ancient city, everyone felt insecure. At this point in time, the scariest thing was people's wicked hearts. The 3 of them who came here from the Merchant Union had gone through many hardships and encountered a lot of warriors who had wanted to kill them. They soon knew that there wasn't any good person in the dark magnetic noxious mist and that they had to rely on themselves to snatch the privilege of having eternal life. Little Shi, don't worry about the beasts. Listen to Xiang. Protect yourself. Kaixiao whispered. Zwushu blinked, nodded obediently. Her pretty eyes brightened, looking at Xiang. Beasts from every direction were wandering around. Xiang was standing in front of the stone fortress with a cold face and resolute eyes. He looked like a 10,000-year-old rock which seemed unwavering while emitting a mighty temperament that only a man could possess. At this moment, Xiang undoubtedly carried a mesmerizing male charm. After not seeing him for ages, in her most dangerous time, she unexpectedly ran into Xiang who had gone missing for a long while. Zwushu's heart was involuntarily agitated a little bit. She subconsciously wondered if this was God's predestined wood or not. Previously, in the Merchant Union, Xiang had a special personality. He was cold and ruthless and thus had left a deep impression in Zwushu's heart. After he had left the Merchant Union, Zwushu always thought of him. She couldn't control her mind as she often compared Xiang with the so-called young outstanding talents of Merchant Union, the Fire Empire. The more comparison she made, the more she felt that those outstanding youths of Merchant Union, the Fire Empire, and God-blessed Empire seemed to be much inferior to Xiang. Regardless of their realm or their mind, they were not as prominent as Xiang. Xiang had been gone for a few years. Zwushu used to make arrangements for her to meet young men from different powerful forces of the Fire Empire and the God-blessed Empire. However, it was unknown why she had always been dissatisfied with those men and had secretly compared them with Xiang. The more she had compared, the more she felt that those people were not as good as Xiang. Zwushu assumed that she would hardly see Xiang again. However, she now suddenly met him in the dark magnetic noxious mist. This unexpected encounter made her both happy and scared at the same time. Watching Xiang's fearless manners when facing numerous beasts, the nervous tension she had been suffering from all along seemed to relax all of a sudden. Elder Kaixiao, you stand over there and be ready to deal with the giant 8-horn giant spiders. Zwa grandfather, you and Kaixiao stay in one place to guard that side. Shi Yang pointed out a direction and then suddenly looked at Ce and the 2 brothers. You stay on the left. Be ready to cope with the single-horn dragon pythons below. Rya, you pay attention to our back. Under the beast's gaze, Xiang calmed down, coldly looked ahead, and said, once those beasts rush over, we must use our full power to kill them. We shouldn't consume too much of our strength either. There are also flames, lightning, tornadoes, and ice outside the castle. Not only must we kill all of these beasts, but we shouldn't allow ourselves to suffer a great loss. Rya and the others nodded at the same time. Kaixiao and Zhuoshu exchanged glances. In the Merchant Union, Shiyang had only had disaster realm cultivation base. Although he had displayed an outstanding performance, he was just an arrogant young generation of the Shi family. Compared to Zhuoshu's and Kaixiao's status by that time, Shiyang had apparently been far less than them. Through the times, not only had Shiyang reached the third sky of Nirvana realm, but he could also instigate the two sky realm female warriors. Looking at these two girls' attitudes, they seemed to actually listen to his orders. Witnessing it with their own eyes, Zhuoshu and Kaixiao were secretly scared and somehow could hardly accept this for the moment. After all, in the Merchant Union, when having dealt with the Beiming family, Shiyang had to listen to their commands, show his respect toward them, and consider them his elders. Suddenly, the situation had changed significantly. They naturally felt a bit strange. Zhuoshu and Kaixiao hesitated but didn't say anything. They just reluctantly let out a sigh and finally obeyed Shiyang's commands as well. Those beasts are waiting for flames and lightning to overflow from the Four Symbols Mountains. They want to wait for those dangers to come and then take actions altogether. Si was standing next to Shiyang, carefully observing the changes in the edge of the ancient city. Her beautiful face slightly changed, and he then said with a terrified voice, "The flames, lightning, tornadoes, and ice don't seem to be aimed at the beasts. Look." After hearing that, everyone looked toward the outskirts of the ancient city. Indeed, those dangers from the four mountains gradually enveloped and began to ravage the ancient city. However, the beasts were still safe under the dangers of flames, lightning, tornadoes, and ice. Those threats could severely injure none of the beasts. Those dangers couldn't even shake the beasts' bodies, but on the contrary, they seemed to enhance their power. After some human warriors had been shrouded by the flames, lightning, tornadoes, and ice, they were either burned up by the flames or frozen by the ice and then blown away by the storm. While the beasts were unharmed, human warriors seemed to be unable to bear those dangers. The human warriors let out ear-splitting screams and quickly avoided the severe weather in panic when those dangers were gradually approaching. Seeing the situation was not going well, the warriors in the peripheral fortress all ran out of those stone fortresses and rushed toward the center of the ancient city. The flames, tornadoes, lightning, and ice slowly approached the ancient city. The center of the city would be the last area to be affected. Thus, moving toward the center of the ancient city would allow them to encounter those disasters much later. Although they were not sure doing this would help them escape from this fatal incident or not, it still helped them delay the time of encountering those disasters and delay their deaths. Therefore, those warriors outside, who were under the chase and slaughter of the beasts, were desperately running toward the center of the ancient city. Hundreds of figures were speeding on the streets of the ancient city. They didn't dare to fight against the beasts, but instead, quickly moved toward the center of the ancient city. The stone fortress that Shiyang's group was staying in was not in the center of the ancient city either. There was a big road between their fortress and the center. Those warriors flew over and thus dragged along the beasts that were chasing them. Those beasts were like surging tides running into the ancient city, getting closer and closer to Shiyang's group. Not good. We need to get to the center of the ancient city. Otherwise, those beasts will exterminate us on their way. After Shiyang thoroughly understood the situation, his face lost color while his hair rose up. He didn't dare to waste a second, shouting out loud, "Rush out at once." Chapter 391, Brutal Killing. Chapter 391, Brutal Killing. As soon as Shiyang shouted, changes started to suddenly appear in the two rivers that were interweaving and hanging in the sky. The weaving point of the two rivers discharged beautiful, dazzling lights, as an extremely violent energy suddenly spread out from that point. In the middle of those blazing lights, ancient corpses sank into the flashing lights and were pulled up and down by the river. The river seemed to contain some secret treasures, which were vaguely visible and were moving towards that weaving point for convergence. Crash! Silver raindrops drizzled down, and the light rain quickly turned into a downpour. The silver shower net came down from the sky, collecting in a shallow lake in the center of the ancient city. That small lake was originally dry. However, after that silver rain, it immediately became moist, and in a short time, the lake had accumulated a few centimeters of water. The silver lake emitted drizzling silver lights, covering the entire sky. When the silver raindrops touched those beasts that were near the lake, they all screamed miserably and turned into diluted blood within seconds. However, human warriors who gathered there were unharmed when the splashing raindrops touched them. The silver raindrops from the sky seemed to aim for the beasts, while they caused no damage to the human warriors. This mutation made those warriors extremely overjoyed. The warriors who were still wandering around rushed into the lake quickly, and were shrouded by the silver halo. Some beasts came close to the small lake, but could only stare at those warriors with eyes filled with hatred, not daring to jump into the lake or approach that silver halo. They seemed to know that those silver lights were only meant to harm them. Hence, they only stayed in the periphery area of the lake, fiercely looking at those human warriors. All warriors were moving and gathering towards the center of the ancient city. After realizing the lake's abnormality, they were all excited and rushed towards the lake. Anyone could see that other areas of the ancient city were not safe. Only the lake area in the center of the city could prevent the beast's attack. Countless stars were sparkling on Shi Yang's body. He could also see the marvelousness on the other side and thus shouted, "Go over there." Rya, Cai, and other people looked excited as they could now see hope. They hurriedly rushed out of the stone castle. Rya and Cao Yi, who were in the sky realm, suspended next to Shi Yang and shouted, "We must hurry. If too many beasts gather around us, we won't be able to pass through them. Rya and Cai, you go with Laro Li and Laro Lun. Elder Kai Xiao, bring Zuoshu and Zuoshe over there with your fastest speed. I will stay behind to support you guys." Shi Yang shouted. Kai Xiao didn't say anything as he brought Zuoshu and Zuoshe with each hand and quickly flew over to Shi Yang's side. "Shi Yang, can you do that?" Zuoshe worried. When Kai Xiao was carrying her, she tried to stretch her head out with a tense face. Although you have a cultivation base of the third sky of Nirvana realm, you cannot resist these beasts as there are too many of them. If you are careless, it will be dangerous for you. Can you do it? Rya also asked the same thing. Her face, however, didn't show much emotion. She simply asked because she was afraid that if Shi Yang couldn't complete this work, it would put her in a difficult situation. Rya and Cai actually didn't want to bring Laro Li and Laro Lun. Carrying a person would hinder them when facing the beasts, and prevent them from casting out their strength, which would slow down their speed. "Stop talking nonsense." Shi Yang grunted. "Before we can leave the dark magnetic noxious mist, we will have to work together. The two brothers haven't reached the sky realm, and thus cannot fly. If you leave them behind, I will have to abandon you. I have already had a look, and that lake is not big. If we arrive there too late, the lake will be filled with too many people. Thus, if we want to get into that lake, then we will have to kick others out of it. And if we do not have consensus now, we will have less help by that time." Laro Li and Laro Lun expressed appreciation. After listening to Shi Yang, they reluctantly agreed and were no longer long-winded. They quickly grabbed the two brothers' hands and leaped up. "Go!" Shi Yang suddenly moved the gravitational fields while roaring out loud. The three gravitational fields now looked like crazy meat blenders, reverberating with ear-piercing sounds. The three gravitational fields immediately changed directions, moving towards the beasts which were wandering and approaching the group of Kai Xiao and Cai, creating a road leading straight to the center of the ancient city. Zuoshu's group didn't dare to hesitate and immediately sped up, moving towards the center of the ancient city. Shi Yang lagged behind. His eyes were cold while he revealed a sneer. He used his mind to control the gravitational fields, clearing the road for the people of Zuoshu's group. 3 gravitational fields floated around Zuoshu's group, preventing the beasts from coming closer. With these 3 gravitational fields, they didn't have to be scared of the beasts which were now on their sides or behind them. They just rushed forward all the way. Shi Yang was the last one, controlling the gravitational fields. He waited for the 3 people to leave and then once again triggered his mind, ordering the 3 gravitational fields to gather in one place, forming an enormous, grey tornado. After the integration of the 3 gravitational fields, this grey tornado was indeed obscure, and almost comparable to the 100 meters high castle. More than 10 sturdy beasts saw the people of Zuoshu's group fly away and then suddenly made their way to Shi Yang, staring at him. Seeing the beasts coming toward him aggressively, he remained calm. He turned into a bunch of starlights, and instantly merged into the huge grey tornado, controlling it and moving towards the direction of Kai Xiao's group. As Shi Yang was in the gravitational field, the beasts didn't dare to come close, but just stared from a distance. This grey tornado monopolized the whole area behind Zuoshu's group. The beasts that wanted to pass through the tornado were forced to take a detour. While they were detouring, Shi Yang displayed the life and death seal. The seal's power bombed out of his hands. It created huge roars and hit those beasts, making them wobble and stagger. Having built the gravitational field, he naturally couldn't suffer from its strangling force. But after having fallen into it, his mind was agitated. The golden silks were bound in a region under the influence of the gravitational field, and thus, stayed motionless in one spot. The golden silks were extremely sharp. Even he didn't dare to see if his body could withstand them or not. At this time, when the situation was critical, he didn't dare to try the powerful golden silk. In the gravitational field, he was stagnant and could only concentrate on controlling the gravitational field, slowly moving towards the center of the ancient city. Kai Xiao and the others sprinted in the air. They instantly avoided the beasts as soon as they came close. In case they really couldn't avoid the beasts, they would work together to push the beasts to the side. They didn't seek to kill many beasts. They just needed to save a little more time to reach the center of the ancient city. What Rya and Kai Xiao did was undoubtedly correct. The beasts rushed over from the 4 surrounding mountains. Most of them were in the periphery area of the ancient city. On the contrary, there were much fewer beasts in the area near the center of the city. In the center of the ancient city, the warriors who were hiding in the small, silver lake had beheaded some beasts, helping reduce their number. Therefore, the closer they got to the center of the ancient city, the fewer beasts they had to face. Thus, it was naturally quite safe. On the contrary, outside the city center, as more and more beasts hustled over, those warriors who hadn't realized the situation were quickly submerged under the beast wave and bitten into pieces. The gravitational field flew around at a moderate speed. Along the way, Shi Yang continuously took actions, dragging 10 warriors who had been killed recently into the gravitational field to absorb their auras. Thus, his harvest was not small at all. He was willing to bear the task of guarding at the back because he precisely spotted the opportunity to take advantage of the chaotic situation to absorb the auras of the dead warriors. With the gravitational field, he didn't need to worry about being besieged by those beasts. Having this confidence, together with this coincident opportunity, he certainly would not let it go. Dozens of dead warriors' corpses were tied up at the same places with the golden silks in every corner of the gravitational field, and were firmly wrapped up by the gravitational field as well. While the auras were running into his body, he took the demon crystals out and stored them inside the blood vein ring. He calmly controlled the gravitational field while moving towards the center of the ancient city. Suddenly, changes started to happen in the small, silver lake in the center of the ancient city again. The small lake was only 10 square meters, which was not large and only was able to accommodate few warriors. The warriors who got into that lake were enjoying their peaceful time without being worried about the beast's attacks. Thus, they obviously didn't want to leave. However, warriors who rushed into the center of the city after having gone through many dangers also wanted to jump into the lake. With that modest area, it was not enough for all the warriors. The newly arrived warriors could only occupy the position of others if they wanted to get into the lake, or else, they would be left outside. At this time, hundreds of beasts were starting to gather in the center of the ancient city. Once all those beasts made it to the center, they would absolutely exterminate warriors who were left outside of the lake. By that time, those warriors who stayed outside of the lake would be torn down to pieces and wouldn't be able to escape. Therefore, In order to occupy the positions in the lake, the warriors began to fight with each other for their own lives. Hence, those warriors recklessly rushed into the lake. The strange thing was that warriors couldn't fly above the lake, even if they were Sky Realm warriors. They couldn't just hang around above the lake and enjoy that silver halo. Everyone who wanted to get into the lake to avoid the flood of beasts' attacks would inevitably have to fight. This was the human warrior-led battle, and even more cruel than the one with the beasts. In the gravitational field, which was a few hundred meters away, Shi Yang saw an area where many secret treasures were rampaging. Brilliant lights splashed out everywhere, all kinds of ice and lightning were constantly bursting out. Suddenly, 2 messages were transmitted out from the blood vein ring: "Let us out." The messages came from the ice-cold flame and the earth flame. These 2 heaven flames were moving and swaying inside the blood vein ring as they seemed to spot some potential benefits. Chapter 392. Give me a position. Chapter 392. Give me a position. What? Shi Yang was shocked and immediately asked, "Why?" "This place has the power that we need to restore ourselves." The earth flame and the ice-cold flame sent out the same message. A trace of happiness flashed across Shi Yang's face. He didn't say anything further and quickly communicated with the blood vein ring, passing out his intention. The blood vein ring emitted hazy rainbow lights. 2 groups of huge burning fires flew out of it. After having left the blood vein ring, the ice-cold flame and the earth flame immediately spread out, dashing toward the Vermilion Bird Mount and Black Turtle Mount respectively. These 2 great heaven flames flew extremely fast like electricity. In a blink, they already arrived at the Vermilion Bird Mount and the Black Turtle Mount and then went directly into the 2 mountains. In the ancient city, the tornadoes, ice, and lightning didn't seem to affect the ice-cold flame and the earth flame. Shi Yang didn't see them encounter any obstacles on the way. Seeing the ice-cold flame and the earth flame disappearing into the Vermilion Bird Mount and the Black Turtle Mount, Shi Yang was both delighted and scared. He vaguely knew that the flames of the Vermilion Bird Mount and the frost of the Black Turtle Mount seemed to be able to fill the power that they had lost. Knowing that the Vermilion Bird Mount and the Black Turtle Mount had great benefits for the 2 kinds of fire, Shi Yang was overjoyed and felt that the trip to the dark magnetic noxious mist was the right choice. Hiding in the gravitational field, Shi Yang was not anxious to go to the center of the ancient city. While looking at that place from afar, he continued collecting the dead warriors' bodies on his way to the center of the city, pulling them into the gravitational field. Beside the Silver Lake, sword lights constantly flashed as the brutal fighting continued. The strengths of the warriors from the Divine Land who could enter this miasma place were not weak. They certainly had some secret treasures for self-defense, and their martial techniques were also quite mysterious. In order to occupy one position in the Silver Lake, the warriors who were still wandering outside the lake began to attack those in the lake. With the lake as a center, all warriors displayed their own martial techniques and took out their secret treasures to fight for survival. At this time, 9 teams had occupied the lake. These 9 teams had around 70 or 80 people. Each team was quite far from each other. The momentum of the warriors of these 9 teams burst out while their secret treasures showed brilliantly. They were all coldly watching the periphery area of the lake. There were 3 teams in the center of the lake. Each team had 2/3 sky of Sky Realm warriors. These people didn't hide their strength at this time, but instead, they spread out all of their mighty power, using their strength to warn those who were snooping outside the lake like tigers stalking their prey. The 3 teams in the center of the lake were the most powerful in the entire ancient city. These 3 teams firmly grasped the lake center, released a strong momentum, hauled out their secret treasures, and coldly looked at others around them. The other 6 teams were going around the edge of the lake. Each of these teams had second sky of Sky Realm warriors. Each of them was holding a secret treasure. Among these 6 teams, 3 teams were facing the attacks of other warriors around the outside of the lake. These 3 teams only had 1 second sky of Sky Realm warrior each, and thus, their strength was relatively weak. And also because of that, warriors outside the lake all spotted these 3 teams' positions and wanted to occupy them. The warriors of these 3 teams in the lake cast out their full strength, using their strongest power to kill the provocateurs next to them, which terrified other oncoming warriors. The three other teams, which were also quite strong, were not the same as those with the third sky of Sky Realm warriors who were calmly sitting in the center of the lake. They instead all stood up and secretly stayed on alert, carefully looking around. Among them, there were the Heavenly Palace's Ningli Ningzi, two other Sky Realm warriors, and another 5 warriors in similar Heavenly Palace costumes. They all stood together, revealing a cold sneer on their faces. The secret treasures in their hands flashed with horrible power. They looked like they were going to discharge their full fatal power at any moment. The group of Rya, Sei, Kaixiao, and the others stayed in the lake's periphery area and didn't dare to enter the key ground as they were afraid of being involved in this chaotic fight. Next to the lake, more than 10 dead bodies were dripping with blood. They were all killed in the fight. Around the lake, the brutal fight was still going on. Some teams won from time to time, killing the warriors of the teams in the lake, and then got into the lake. These new teams that had just settled in the lake were immediately faced with other teams wanting to challenge their position. Death at this moment became incredibly easy. Ningzi obviously saw Ci and Rya. However, at this moment, Ningzi and the others didn't come out of the lake to deal with Ci and Rya. They just coldly looked at Ci and Rya as if they wanted to see the beasts tear those girls to pieces. Why hasn't Xiang come yet? Zwusha looked at the fight in the lake and secretly clucked her tongue while her eyes displayed a trace of panic. All of these people are crazy. If it keeps going like this, more than half of the number of these warriors will kill each other and die even before all the beasts come. Since Xiang is that confident, nothing will happen to him. Zwusha, there is no need to be worried. That kid is not an ordinary person. Kaixiao lifted a corner of his mouth and said, in only a few years, that kid has already reached the third sky of Nirvana realm. I don't know how he cultivated so fast. Sai, I thought that you were superior enough, but compared to this kid, you are still a bit inferior to him. Zwusha, let's see if you dare not to do your best later. Zwushu stared at her. Boom. A warrior was struck away by a top-class warrior in the lake. His body suddenly burst out and blood splashed everywhere. Kaixiao raised his eyebrows and then swung up his arm. A cluster of white smoke drifted, wiping the shower of blood and smashed flesh aside. It's horrible. People here are stronger than those in our merchant union. The merchant union is still a safe place. Since we came here, we have lost too many people. If we are attacked and killed here, it would be tragic, Zwushu sadly sighed. Zwusha also nodded, sticking out her tongue and resentfully saying, you both shouldn't have asked to come here. We wouldn't have lost so many people. After listening to what she had said, Kaixiao let out a sigh. Xiang is here. Rya suddenly screamed out. Kaoyi, Kaixiao, and the others hastened to turn their heads. An enormous grey tornado slowly approached from the distance. Dozens of corpses floated in the tornado, swinging and swaying in accordance with the tornado. Behind the grey tornado, more than 10 beasts rushed over while howling. Although they were letting our ear-splitting growls, they didn't dare to enter the tornado. In the tornado, Xiang showed an emotionless face, revealed a wicked smile, and coldly looked at the beasts that were surrounding him, but he didn't feel scared at all. Come on. Another powerful man is coming. It seems that we will have fewer and fewer chances to have a spot here. Who is that little rascal? It seems that I have never met him before. Does he belong to one of the 7 ancient factions? Nonsense. If he is not a person from one of the 7 ancient factions, how come he is this powerful? Warriors surrounding the lake also noticed Xiang hiding in the tornado. Seeing dozens of corpses floating in the tornado and many beasts staying outside the gravitational field without daring to jump into it, those warriors all displayed a frightened face and clambered up. No one could blame them for being scared. Those corpses and the beast's attitude were enough to explain the problem. Even though it seemed that Xiang was only in the third sky of Nirvana realm, he displayed a momentum that brought people fear. In the grey tornado, which was 100 meters away, were twisted energies blended thrillingly. Anyone could see how powerful that gravitational field was. Seeing Xiang heading their direction, the warriors who were outside the lake hesitated before quickly stepping aside. They didn't dare to block his way. Even the three most powerful teams in the center of the lake also noticed Xiang. Those third sky of Sky Realm all had their eyes locked on Xiang. Ningz's face suddenly changed. Watching Xiang coming, he quickly informed the people around, "That's him." Listening to Ningz's word, the eyes of another Heavenly Palace's warrior who was in the second sky of Sky Realm brightened up, staring at Xiang. "Damn it. It seems that our position will be lost again. This little rascal is extremely powerful. One of the other 6 teams on the side of the lake will definitely be out of luck. Yes, this time is really unlucky. If we can't get into the lake soon, aren't we going to be torn apart by those beasts? Wait for the opportunity. As long as we have a ray of hope, we will immediately drill into the lake. Let that bastard pass by smoothly unless you want to lose your life." They all displayed aggressive and unfearful faces. In this cruel situation, they would do anything for their lives. "Xiang, we are here," Zwasha waved her hand. Her pretty face was full of joy. In the gravitational field, Xiang sneered and controlled the gravitational field moving towards Zwasha's group of people. Seeing him approaching Zwashu's group, the warriors around cursed and instantly gave way to Xiang's oncoming grey tornado. The 3 most powerful teams of warriors all looked at Xiang, who was rapidly approaching. When he got closer, they had a quick glance at him and immediately displayed a trace of horror on their faces. From a short distance, they could see the storm of the gravitational field and the chaotic forces interweaved in one place, resulting in a very terrible move. They were not sure if they could get out of that gravitational field safe and sound after jumping into it. The 100-meter-high grey tornado wrapped Xiang and dozens of corpses while slowly moving forward. As soon as the beasts behind the tornado saw many warriors gathering, they didn't care about life or death and rushed over to the warriors who were lagging behind. There were dozens of beasts which were not really the main force. However, more beasts that had been lagging behind were on their way. The situation was getting more and more dangerous. After Xiang had arrived, he left the gravitational field fixed outside the small lake. He suddenly knitted his eyebrows, looking at the 9 teams of warriors in the lake. After having had a quick glance at Xiang, the faces of the warriors of those 9 teams slightly changed. They were all vigilant as Xiang was staring at them. "You guys." Xiang threw them a look, grinned, pointed to the Heavenly Palace's team of Ningzi and said, "You guys come out. Leave that position for us." Ningzi's face became cold. The face of the middle-aged man with the second sky of Sky Realm cultivation base also changed. "Rya and Tsai, they are our goal." Xiang pointed to Ningzi's group and coldly said, "We don't have much time. After killing them, we can sit and rest for a while." Rya, Cie, Kaixiao, and the others all nodded. Chapter 393, Defeated. Chapter 393, Defeated. As soon as Xiang finished talking, he instantly controlled the gravitational field, moving it directly towards Ning Zed's group in the lake. In the center of the lake, seeing the gravitational field coming, the 3 powerful teams of warriors suddenly displayed grave faces with their eyes stuck on Xiang. In the gravitational field, there was a mixture of different powers. The more kinds of powers it had, the more intimidating the gravitational field would become. Although Xiang only had a cultivation base of third sky of Nirvana realm, the energy in that gravitational field was extremely mighty, enough to terrify even a Sky Realm warrior. Xiang was hiding in the gravitational field and suddenly flew out when it got closer to Ning Zed's group. Each gold silk in the gravitational field abruptly spread out crazily. Golden lights twisted with each other and filled the space up fast. The faces of Ning Zed's team changed dramatically. Being the Heavenly Palace's warriors, they were obviously aware of how powerful the golden silks were. Even though they used golden silks to cultivate, they could only control their own golden silks. If others cultivated them, they could be lethal to them too. Therefore, seeing the gravitational field that contained the golden silks rushing over, the people of Ning Zed's group quickly dodged it. "Little rascal, you do whatever you want, but don't come near us. Otherwise, don't blame us for joining forces to kill you." In the center of the small lake, A warrior of third sky of Sky Realm with a face full of scars suddenly stood up after he saw the gravitational field coming closer and closer. He grunted coldly and spoke up to warn Shi Yang. Sitting on the ground, the other third sky of Sky Realm warriors also coldly looked at Shi Yang with darkened faces. The lake was not large, while the gravitational field that Shi Yang controlled occupied a lot of space. Once the gravitational field stormed into the lake, it would affect and severely injure all the warriors inside it. Shi Yang smiled indifferently, nodded and said, "No worries. We just want a place in the lake. We will not mess with you." There were 9 teams in the lake. 3 of them had warriors at the third sky of Sky Realm. If he irritated them, he knew that the consequences would not look good. Therefore, he still controlled the gravitational field carefully, letting it move forward at a very slow speed. For those teams, as long as Shi Yang's group had the ability to replace Ning Ze's group and didn't affect them, they would not intervene. They would not mind if the people of Ning Ze's group were alive or dead. "You are too contemptuous." The face of the middle-aged second sky of Sky Realm warrior in Ning Ze's group became cold. He suddenly grunted and moved aside to avoid the gravitational field, which was getting close as he rushed out of the lake. Seeing that man take action, Ning Ze and the others in his group also knew that they had to make a move to avoid the gravitational field. Involving themselves in a fight with Shi Yang could hopefully help them secure a firm position in the lake. That man slightly moved as the others in Ning Ze's group hesitated a little, and then suddenly rushed out as well from the lake, turning into electric lights that struck in the direction of Kai Xiao and Rya. "Finally you're getting out," Shi Yang sneered coldly in his heart. He waited for Ning Ze's group to get out from the lake to drill them into the gravitational field. The formerly slow gravitational field instantly became extremely violent, and its spinning speed became very fast, quickly covering the 3 Heavenly Palaces warriors. Those 3 warriors had just gotten out of the lake. They didn't think the gravitational field could get any faster. Thus, a slight carelessness had let them suffer the strong pulling force towards the center of the gravitational field. Each golden silk wrapped and tied them up in a short time. In just one breath, among ear-splitting screams, the 3/3 sky of Nirvana Realm warriors had been crushed into pieces and then violently driven up by the gravitational field, turning into smashed pieces of flesh. Other warriors who were watching in the distance felt cold in their hearts. They looked at Shi Yang with terrified faces, and subconsciously moved backward, distancing themselves from this gravitational field. Kai Xiao let out a big scream. A lot of smoke diffused from his body, covering a range of 10 meters around him. In this thick smoke, bursts of violent energy fluctuations consistently came out one after the other. Kai Xiao was in the smoke, raising his hands and releasing a silver band. This ribbon split out in the air, shining brilliantly, and instantly wrapped a Heavenly Palaces warrior at the second sky of Sky Realm, pulling him into the thick smoke. Rya's and Cai's faces became cold. That great pervaded money and a cluster of rings flew out together from these 2 girls' hands, covering Ning Ze and the other 2 Heavenly Palaces warriors in the bright luster. Shi Yang burst into a crazy laughter. The negative forces spread all over his body while his momentum increased significantly. Inside numerous starlight spots, he shifted toward Ning Ze and released a blow of the life seal that struck Ning Ze. Ning Ze coldly harumphed. He didn't believe that Shi Yang, who was only in Nirvana Realm, could have the real strength to fight against him. He used his hand to cover the 3 green thumb rings on his hands. Instantly, 2 of them flew out as a strong soil element force also followed along. It seemed that thumb rings could stir up the earth power in heaven and earth. In the vortex, a vast, magnificent earth intent domain burst out from the 3 thumb rings. Crystal profound chi from Ning Ze's fingertips poured into those 3 thumb rings, enhancing their earth intent domain's power, which made them release an extremely violent energy movement that started to attack Shi Yang. All objects had a spirit. The intent domain of Shi Yang's life seal, which involved the vitality of all spirits in heaven and earth, suddenly crashed into the 3 thumb rings. Boom! 2 kinds of violent energy movements, which contained different martial intent domains, collided. The impact of that collision discharged beautiful, bright lights like fireworks, which shocked the other people. Life was unprincipled. Every creature had its own uniqueness. As long as the creatures had consciousness, life would become its most valuable asset. When this life seal was released, some lives of human beings and beasts became vaguely visible. These living forms were exposed differently from this life seal, and then split the fundamental earth intent domain of those 3 thumb rings. They separately pushed the soil element force of those 3 thumb rings aside, preventing them from continuously using the earth's power. Although Shi Yang was only in the nirvana realm, his comprehension of the life intent domain seemed to be more profound than Ning Zed's enlightenment of the land conception. This supernatural profound meaning originally didn't distinguish the level of a warrior's strength. The high or low concept of an intent domain entirely depended on how a warrior understood the realm. After having entered this marvelous world, Shi Yang was still fighting. At the critical point of life and death, although he was not afraid of death, he still tried to save his own life. His understanding regarding the desire to live of every living creature obviously suited with the innate character of the life seal's intent domain. After having gone through the rampage and using the power imposed by the life seal, Shi Yang was already stronger than Ning Zi. His comprehension of intent domain was a little more profound than Ning Z's. Thus, the intimidation of this life seal naturally had the upper hand. The life seal determinedly split Ning Z's intent domain and covered the 3 thumb rings light. When the life seal submerged the 3 thumb rings, the energy inside the life seal also drilled towards Ning Zi. Ning Z's intent domain became inferior, and his confidence was damaged. The life seal struck his whole body and sent him flying. While he was still in the air, his body produced crackling sounds. His body's bones didn't seem to be able to bear this blow, and suddenly cracked open. Ning Z's body was covered with blood even before landing. His face was totally pale, and his spirit was greatly weakened. So, this is what Sky Realm is like. Shi Yang sneered coldly. Your comprehension of martial intent domain is still shallow. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to crush you while I am only in the nirvana realm. If your intent domain hadn't dissipated, your 3 thumb rings could have still condensed the earth's power, and thus, it would not be easy for me to hurt you. P2E. Ning Zi suddenly spewed out a mouthful blood. His spirit was totally subdued. Not only did Shi Yang use the life seal to bombard Ning Zi, but he also used words to destroy his will. If a warrior wanted to display his full strength, self-confidence was essential. When a person could not believe in himself, he could hardly release all of his power, even though he still had enough strength. Ning Zi was feeling self-doubt. Shi Yang used words to attack and destroy Ning Z's confidence, giving him thoughts of being inferior to Shi Yang. Once this kind of thought appeared in Ning Z's mind, it would be difficult for him to exert all of his strength. He tried to protect himself but failed because his defensive profound qi became chaotic all of a sudden. Ning Z's chaotic profound qi allowed the impact of Shi Yang's life seal to burst out inside his body, making more of his bones explode. At this moment, Ning Zi couldn't help but spit out a mouthful blood. His whole body was exhausted. Spurting blood meant that Ning Zi no longer had any confidence. This blow affected not only this fight, but also the rest of his life. Seeing Ning Zi falling on the ground and spitting out a mouthful blood because of Shi Yang's words, the third sky of Sky Realm warriors in the lake all shook their heads, knowing that Ning Zi was totally screwed. They all looked at Shi Yang with grave seriousness. Most of the warriors could destroy a person's body. However, destroying a person's will required accumulating momentum, great wisdom, and a determined and ruthless mind. Shi Yang was the type of person who had absolute self-confidence. Moreover, he firmly believed that he was better than anyone, and was not easy to yield to other people because of any difficulties. This kind of warrior was the most terrible. You are not my match. Shi Yang displayed a cruel face as he calmly walked toward Ning Zi. He was not hurried to take action but continued his degrading words. Ning Z's face looked horrified. He blankly sat there with a confused look while his mind was panicked. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.